as ever. The USPS is outsourcing postal work, closing mail facilities, and seems to have adopted a mindset of cutting and slashing rather than maintaining the enormous Postal Service capacity and network. Wisconsin State Association of Letter Carriers President Scott Van Derven says that the shape of postal service is vital if America is to keep its postal service for generations to come.
Big elephant in the room, naturally, is postal reform legislation. And we need something that is sensible, that's not going to destroy the Postal Service in order to try and save it. Our pre-funding, we are pre-funding employee retirement health benefits 75 years into the future in a very short time span. When we start hearing about all these dollars that the Postal Service is in debt, it's really servicing that particular postal mandate. And we're talking about enormous billions of dollars. Those are the kinds of things I think we need to have our friends in Congress really understand what good postal reform would be, and it doesn't just include just lopping off huge sections of it and somehow expecting it to survive.
Van Derven says people living in rural areas, senior citizens, and low-income Americans need postal service the most, and they are the hardest hit by the cutbacks. Detroit has put a 15-day moratorium on water shutoffs to low-income Detroiters. Community activists are protesting the water shutoffs that some see as a prelude to privatization of the Motor City's water services. Betty O'Connor Rogers is vice president of the Michigan Nurses Association. Her union has joined protests against the water shutoffs because the nurses see it not only as an economic and social justice issue, but a public health issue.
We're nurses, and nurses are involved with the health, not just the people who are in hospitals or what have you, but of the community. And nurses really do need to get involved and be able to help these folks stand up for themselves. And also we, as people who live together as a community, we should be standing up for each other.
O'Connor Rogers says Detroit needs to find a solution other than just cutting off water to people who can't afford it.
You just make their situation worse. Instead of lifting them up and helping them stand up, you actually bring them more down. And that just, even on a fundamental human right issue, is just wrong.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rock on. Go ahead, this town is my town. Alright, you're a hater, it don't matter. Stand and fight, this town is my town. She got her ups and downs, but love, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots of things to talk about. Income inequality on the top of the list. Interesting article put out by the St. Louis Federal Reserve. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The continued attack on workers and their representatives by our newly seated, very wealthy, I guess multi-millionaire new senator, Scott. I keep wanting to call him Scott Walker because there's those similarities, but it's Scott Wagner, the Tony Soprano of Central Pennsylvania. We'll talk about that. Also going to have a couple of conversations with people at the American Postal Workers Union, their convention going on as we speak. In the third hour, a little bit about housing. You remember Mitt Romney saying, all we need to do is, to take all those houses from people who can't afford them. They were just greedy and they wanted to buy, these bungalows. What we're going to do is we're going to take those from them. We're going to steal their houses because, obviously we stole their jobs and their pensions and their savings and their dreams and, all of that. We're going to take the houses back. We're going to sell them to investors. And the investors will then rent it back to the poor people who were buying the house for themselves. And now those poor people will be buying the house for the investor. And that, my friends, the American way. Absolutely, positively, unequivocally, the way the American experience was built. And Romney said this would be the great thing. This would be fabulous. We could get those renters in because the investors would take over. We would have industrialized slumlords who would then rent back houses and not care for them. Because one of the things that I've always said is that home ownership, that pride of ownership, gives you the want, the desire, and all of that to care for your property. And daily upkeep and all that. In some rental situations, you end up with who knows. And if you've got a landlord who's not fixing something, and if you don't have the resources to fix it, what then happens? You end up living in pretty horrible conditions. And that I remember as a kid. Honestly, I remember growing up as a kid in places where things never seemed to ever get fixed, and you learn how to put things together with bubble gum and barbed wire and scotch tape or whatever. We'll talk about that in the third hour because, as I predicted, and it doesn't take a genius to figure this stuff out, but as I predicted, you will see Wall Street slumlords. And a new report out saying that, well, congratulations, Rick, you were right. We've got one of the big Wall Street hedge funds who own a whole ton of houses. And they're, as you would predict, they're falling down. They're not up to code. And we don't have the enforcement mechanisms anymore. We've defunded local government. We've defunded oversight and all of that because the free market. Don't you know, Rick? It's free enterprise. Also, gonna love to hear your thoughts on that. Also, big news. Yesterday, the big news came out. The Pennsylvania lottery. Remember the lottery that we were going to sell off for basically nothing? Because, hey, if we've got it, we might as well sell it, right? Evidently, the Pennsylvania lottery, for the fourth year in a row, number 4, fourth consecutive year in a row, they have seen increased revenue. In fact, they've generated more than $1 billion in net revenue that has, here in Pennsylvania, we claim it helps older Pennsylvanians. In Ohio, the lottery was set up for education. Personally, I got to be honest, right from the start, before I go through this whole how wonderful the lottery has done under public control kind of thing, I remember sitting in on the hearings when the UK company wanted to buy or wanted to lease it or manage it, or I forget the technical. They wanted to lease the management of it. We were going to bring in some private company to do it for us that, we're going to guarantee us some pennies. And I remember the woman who was the CEO. She was talking about in the UK where they actually run the lottery there. And they were talking about what they use the money for. And I don't know that anybody else in the room picked up on it, or if it was, it was something that grabbed anyone else in this room of 150 people. But she said that in the UK, they use the lottery proceeds to fund the Olympics. They used it to fund the arts. They used it for summer concerts and picnics and things that you would consider not baseline stuff, things you would consider extras. They used it to fund the arts and humanities and all of that stuff for life actualization, for beauty and all these other non-bread and meat and potatoes kind of things. And here in this country, we use it here in Pennsylvania for our most vulnerable older citizens. In Ohio, they use it, like I said, for education. In other states, it's between the two. And for me, I look at this and I go, shouldn't we as a society say, those two groups, fairly important, should be line items on the budget, that we don't have money based on whims, based on if the market's good or bad, or based on if people are desperate and they want to gamble away their last $20? Shouldn't we be considering how to make sure that their resources are there? I guess that's just my take on this, and I'm always curious of what your thoughts are on this. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Phone lines up and working, fortunately, here in the new studio. But here, fourth consecutive year, it has reached record ticket sales. You've seen this generation of a billion in net revenue to support programs that help older Pennsylvanians. The ticket sales hit about $3.8 billion, about $100 million above what it was last year, about 2.7% up. According to their annual report from 2013-14, nearly 2/3 of the sales, the revenue of the sales, came from the scratch-off instant kind of things, which I got to be honest, I've never played. I don't get the thing behind it, but fortunately people do, and hey, good for them. If you've got $1 or $5 or $10, or I've seen some outrageous numbers. Good for you. Personally, as I've always said, I'd rather just throw $1 out the window and watch people scramble for it. That would probably get me a lot more fun, because I'm never going to win. Anyway, according to the report, people who did scratch off or people who did put money in, they did better this year than they did last year. Evidently, out of the $3.8 billion that was spent, about $2.4 billion went back out in prize money. People who scratched and won, which evidently the $2.4 billion, another record. There were 76 people who won $1 million or more, and congratulations to them. They now have retirement plans. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the scratch-off or the lottery retirement plan. I'd rather have a defined benefit plan, one that kind of just stays right there. I know what I'm going to have. It's secure. It's there. But some like the lottery. I'm just not one of them. There are in excess of 9,100 retail outlets across the Commonwealth, which evidently made a boatload of money. In fact, the report said about $2.2 million they made, or 6.3%, 6.3 million more than last year. And I look at this and I go, over 9,100 retailers. What would the private company have done? 9,100 would it have been 18,000? Would you be able to, while walking down the street, just put your money in as you're going? I don't know. I don't know how much more saturation you can get. But one of the things that caught my eye in the report is, the cost of running our lottery, because it is ours. The cost of running it, 2.04% of what it cost. It cost about $850,000 last year. Or cost rose $850,000, but the actual cost of operating it dropped, because it was 2.07. Now it's 2.04. And if you remember, let's go back to the privatization talk. The company that was going to manage it was talking about a rate double that, which means out of $3.8 billion, you're looking at, 2% of that, which is a sizable number, but then double that. And that's what the private company was going to get. Here's the part that caught me, and I said, this isn't a bad thing. They claim that nearly 98% of every dollar that the lottery generated, took in, whatever, went right back into the community, one way or another, by prizes to winners, the benefits to seniors, or to the retailers and the vendors. So 98% of it went right back into, I would even argue the workers as well. Now, again, you go back to what would have happened had we privatized that? Well, there's some that said that the prizes would have probably gone down, as they have done in other places. Some say that the money would have been sucked out of the community, that there were bits and pieces of it that had higher rewards for the company, because hey, they didn't want to take it over for nothing. They weren't going to run it for free. And when you look at such a 2%, I mean, you're talking about 2% operating cost. It's mind-blowing to me. Now, lottery officials, according to the article I read, a little concerned because right now 27% of ticket revenues that go to support senior programs, the profit margins, they're now worried because that number could drop to 25, and they're kind of concerned, what it means in the future. So we'll see what the legislature does there. I'm just glad to know that, it's done. They're not going to be able to privatize it, at least anytime soon, because I think most people realized it was a screw job. It was a massive ripoff. And because if we're going to expand, if we're going to do things, why don't we just do it ourselves? So I'm curious your thoughts on that and much, much more as we move through the program. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Red roses too. I see them blue for me and you. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
It's time for the world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. The UN Security Council met yesterday and voted unanimously in favor of granting investigators access to the crash site of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 in eastern Ukraine. The foreign ministers of the Netherlands and Australia were on hand for the special session. Between them, the two countries were home to more than 3/4 of Flight 17's 298 casualties. Speaking after the vote, here is Dutch Foreign Minister Frans Timmermans.
The demise of almost 200 of my compatriots has left a hole in the heart of the Dutch nation. It has caused grief, anger, and despair. To my dying day, I will not understand that it took so much time for the rescue workers to be allowed to do their difficult jobs, and that human remains should be used in the political game.
EU foreign ministers met today to weigh cutting off all military exports to Russia, and you'll hear about it here if and when they make their next move. Heavy fighting consumes the Libyan capital, Tripoli, with the city's international airport serving as the front line between rival militias from the cities of Misrata and Zintan. After days of gunfire and shelling, 90% of the planes at the airport have been destroyed. And for now, the Libyan government lacks the means, and its soldiers the will, to intervene and guard critical infrastructure points. Last week, the Libyan government asked the UN to send military advisors to stabilize the situation, but citing security concerns, the UN instead decided to pull out its staffers from the country. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Chance Seals. After news broke that a federal court ruling invalidated a portion of the Affordable Care Act, Fox's America's Newsroom host Bill Hemmer trotted out contributor Ben Carson, an anti-ACA activist and retired neurosurgeon, for his thoughts on the ruling.
It almost sounds like the Supreme Court's got a redo on its hands, if it wants or chooses to go that way.
Well, it's probably good, because I suspect some of them probably have had some second thoughts about their initial pass on this, and it's good. I actually am very pleased with what I'm seeing happening.
Recently, Fox's chosen commentator had this to say about Obamacare.
I have to tell you, Obamacare is really, I think, the worst thing that has happened in this nation since slavery.
After Carson was criticized for the comparison of ACA to slavery, he subsequently stood by his remarks. For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Quality is in play. Work you should organize without haste. Have the vote in your workplace. Work with your manager face to face. Let's go! It's starting again. The change, a new labor rate. Support the EFCA. Let's go! It started again.
Let me tell you tell me what you think of this. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Just curious thoughts on this, because I came across this article about a new high-rise building, a 33-story complex being built in New York City. And it's one of those things where you go, we're talking about income inequality in this country. We're talking about for at least a decade now. I mean, you go back to John Edwards, which is more than a decade ago, talking about two Americas, talking about the America for the very well-to-do, all of the riches, the best schools, the best hospitals, the best healthcare, the best opportunity, everything the best land, everything, you name it, for a segment. And then for everybody else, it's, scramble. It's fight, it's scramble, it's scurry, it's fight and scratch and claw and all of that, and not be seen. So I see this story that this Extel company in New York is going to build this 33-story high-rise on New York City's Upper West Side, and actually got clearance to build a separate entrance, or what is being called a pour door, for those people. Now, understand how these things work, especially in New York. There's a credit system that you get if you're a builder and you build low cost, maybe what they would call affordable housing. So maybe on the alley side of the street, you build some affordable housing that gets you up over the next building, and then whatever looks out over on the river, or whatever, looks out to the ocean, or looks out to the Statue of Liberty, or looks to who knows where. Those are premium or prime apartments that you sell for big bucks. So you got the little crummy ones down in the basement, or the little crummy ones in the alley, or whatever. And look, hey, the people need places to live. And then, of course, you have your penthouses and your upper, the ones on top, because they belong on top because they're better. You have those that sell for a premium. But in order to get these credits that you get from the city or from the state, you've got to build a certain percent of low income, maybe more affordable properties, apartments or whatever. And in the past, everyone came through the front door, and you went into your elevator, and they went to their elevator. Maybe they stopped on the second floor, and the rich people went to the 50th floor or whatever. Now what they want to do, what this company has gotten permission to do, they've gotten clearance from the city to do. And I'm curious what your thought on this is. Completely separate entrances. The rich people, they go through the gold-plated, beautifully glass-lined with art and all kinds of services, and you name it. And of course, the poor people maybe through the back door, and maybe only certain times. And I guess it's fairly common that you have these buildings where you have the very well-to-do who live in their prime spots, with the best views, which is okay. I'm all right with that. This I'm a little freaked out by. This idea where now we're really separating people by, sorry, you're not allowed in this door. You have to go through another door. Now look, it's gone on for a while that if you lived in these buildings where they're the affordable places that are maybe rent controlled or whatever, you didn't get to use the swimming pool, and you didn't get to use the gym or the basketball courts or any of the other stuff. None of the amenities are for you. They're only for the rich people. that's been going on for a while. And I don't like it, to be honest. Not thrilled with this idea. To me, and I've had these conversations before, and we've talked about it here on this program, how you raise all of society up, how you make sure that the community increases as a whole, is that you don't allow this split. You don't allow a split of resources. You don't allow a split of facilities. You just don't let it happen. This is what's going on with public education right now as we speak, because the very well-to-do, they can send their kids to the private schools that have small classes, tons of individual attention, and none of that idiotic standardized testing. They can send their kids to that stuff. You poor people, well, you need to learn how to take a test, and you need to learn how to follow orders, and, well, you need an alarm clock. And, I look at this and I go, I'm really uncomfortable by this. When you had the rich guy who had to send his kids to the public schools got better because he wanted his kids to have a good education as well. And that meant that everybody did better. When you're splitting these resources and you're splitting all of this stuff up, what that means is you're going to have a continual hold of opportunity, a continual grasping of power and consolidation of power and holding on to of power, and then on the other side of that, a continual pushing down of everyone else. And as I look at this, the city, New York City lawmakers are starting to go, you know what, we might need to start looking at some anti-discrimination legislation. Maybe something to include tenants who are now being heavily discriminated against, according to these reports, because of where in the building they live. And to me, this is how far we've gone. Now, some would say, and I'm sure that there's someone out there, well, at least they get to live in the building. And true. But if that's the case, should we have to pay for that? Because these builders do get enormous credits that actually end up paying for a good portion of the building. So, you got to start, I kind of look at this in a couple of different ways. I personally very uncomfortable with the idea of having two separate entrances, and never the two shall meet. That, again, sends that clear demarcation that we really are, honestly and truthfully, two very distinct nations. The nations of haves and haves and haves, and then the rest of us. Because I don't know very many people who are going to be walking in that front door. When you look at the price tag that comes with some of these apartments in the millions of dollars. Now, understand, to live in Manhattan, if you want to live in Manhattan and rent an apartment, you're talking somewhere around $3,200, $3,300 a month, and going upward. And you look at people who may make $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. You're going to be able to afford $3,200 a month? Of course not. Which is why they've gotten some of these rent subsidies and some of this stuff to go on. So to me, I'm not thrilled with this. So I'm curious your thoughts. You can always give us a call or email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Very interested in your thoughts. Quick break. Right back after this.
When the kids are united, they can never be divided. As yesterday, there's a brand new chef today.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
It really looked like, the cauldron of hell.
Record wildfires burn 1 million acres in the Pacific Northwest. It's official. June 2014 was the hottest June on record. EPA moves to block massive Pebble Mine in Alaska. Plus,
hey, where's the meat?
Want to cut your emissions? Then cut out that hamburger.
Do I have to?
Do you care about the planet?
Oh, now you're playing the care about the planet card, eh? All of that and much more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Carbon dioxide is actually a benefit to the world, and so were the Jews.
Yeah. Wait, what? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, that guy, carbon dioxide is good, and so are the Jews. We also played a clip from him last week on CNBC saying,
You don't believe in climate change at all. You made a comment.
Just a minute. I believe in climate change.
Sir,
Shut up.
Shut up. So who the hell is that guy, and what the hell is he talking about?
Yeah, that's William Happer. He's a professor with no discernible experience in climate science. He is paid by a free market think tank that denies climate change and is partly funded by, surprise, ExxonMobil and the Koch brothers.
And his connection, apparently he's compared carbon dioxide to the Holocaust or something?
Yes, he's basically said that carbon dioxide has been demonized the same way that Jews were demonized during the Holocaust in World War II or something like that.
So he was called a denier, and he takes offense because people who deny the Holocaust are called deniers, and oh, it's a whole lot of crazy. I'm glad they give him airtime over on CNBC. Anyway, what kind of real news do you have for us today, Des?
Well, first,
It really looked like, the cauldron of hell. You can see flames everywhere you looked.
a break in the weather is finally helping firefighters who are battling record wildfires across Washington, Oregon, and Western Canada. In Washington state, the Carlton Complex fire is now the largest wildfire in state history, burning an area 4 times larger than Seattle, destroying at least 200 homes.
With this kind of heat and wind, it looks like Eastern Washington is going to burn to the ground.
As of July, in Washington state, the total burn area from numerous fires is already more than the yearly average over the last decade, and fire season's only about a week old. Meanwhile, it's official. June 2014 was the hottest June ever recorded on the planet since record-keeping began in 1880.
Impossible. I have been told by global warming deniers that the planet has been cooling over the past 17 years.
Yeah, well, not according to the annual State of the Climate report from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This hottest June on record follows the hottest May on record for the planet. That's 2 months in a row that the planet has broken all-time heat records.
For the record, I deny that.
Well, the report also confirms that the world's oceans are absorbing much of the heat trapped by greenhouse gas emissions, and that's raising ocean temperatures not just to a record high for the month of June. NOAA says that these were the hottest ocean temperatures ever recorded. Ever. This past spring, levels of heat-trapping carbon dioxide in the atmosphere passed 400 parts per million for the first time in human history and have now stayed above that level. In California, 2013 was the hottest and driest year for the state on record, and in the midst of that record drought, state regulators have ordered an emergency shutdown of 11 oil and gas wastewater injection wells because they could be polluting groundwater. In the past, the state allowed the oil industry to intentionally pollute some groundwater aquifers to dispose of toxic drilling waste because they didn't think those aquifers would ever be tapped. Now the state is in record unending drought. ProPublica says the state was so lax in oversight that the oil companies very likely have also polluted protected aquifers. Want to reduce your carbon footprint?
No.
Well, for those who do, you can do it by cutting out beef. According to a new study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, beef production has the biggest environmental impact of all livestock production. Researchers studying the entire process from farm to supermarket found that eggs, pork, and poultry were all about equivalent in environmental impact, but beef generates 10 times the environmental impact and has the highest carbon emissions. Finally, score one for salmon. In Alaska, the EPA has proposed new restrictions for water pollution that would effectively block the development of the controversial proposed Pebble mine.
The EPA has denied them their license to mine?
Well, sort of, but not outright. They put a cap on how many miles of streams and wetlands can be destroyed in the headwaters of Bristol Bay, the world's largest salmon fishery.
Yeah, sounds like the EPA is a denier to me. For much more on those stories and all the other ones we denied you, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, and you can find and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Shut up.
When it feels
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-888-520-RICK. That's 1-888-520-7425. Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
All the things you want are real. You have you to complete, and there is no deal.
A couple of emails during the break. One on each side. Howard writes, I think it's a great idea. Gives people something to work for, something to strive for. You know, like when you were a kid growing up in the projects. Remember that, Rick? Yeah, Howard, I actually do remember pretty vividly. I also don't remember going, I want to go through a separate door and be treated like a second-class citizen. Maybe it's just a difference in thought. Maybe it's just a difference in opinion, but this whole idea of separate and an unequal, I'm not going there. Not going there at all. Although that's where we seem to be, really. I mean, when you stop and think about it. Education, supposedly the great equalizer, right? Can you really make a cogent argument that every kid gets an equal opportunity at education? I can't. I absolutely cannot. Nor could I as a kid. Linda writes, Rick, this has to be a joke story. Are you sure? Did you check? Did you Google? Did you do your due diligence? We're told this is America, a classless society, right? Wrong. Wrong, Linda. Wrong. And I love to believe that. And I know a lot of people do love to believe the idea that we're a classless society. But reality is what it is. We are absolutely a class-based society, and getting more so every day. And this story about a building in the Upper West Side of Manhattan is just one of those in a 1,000 stories that show us where we're going and where we've come from and where we're heading and the direction we're going. And today I got this email with a story from the St. Louis Federal Reserve titled U.S. Income Inequality May Be High, but it's lower than world income inequality. So it may be bad here, but it's not as bad as everywhere else. And really at the end of it, the basic premise is that, it's bad. We're not saying it's not. We're not saying that it doesn't exist. But we're better off than those developing countries. And if that's your argument, that at least we're better off than Zimbabwe, I don't know that you really have much of an argument. And, they bring up the fact that, back in December, the president brought up, and kind of late in my view, would have liked to have seen it a little sooner, but he brought up this divide between the top 10% and everybody else. The people who would come through the front door, and then all the rest of us who would be going through the back door. And, of course, you go to the Occupy Wall Street movement, who are really focused on that 1%. And even if you broke it even further down, not even just the 1%, the 1% of the 1%, because even they're splitting away from each other. They don't want to be a part of that other 99% of that 1%. Why would they want that? They're superior to those people. And I've talked about that in the past. I've got a very well-to-do uncle who lives in a very exclusive gated community of fellow multimillionaires, and even there they've got a pecking order, which I find hysterical. Old money versus new money, that kind of stuff. You actually worked for your money? How dare you? But this report goes into some interesting numbers. And, they look at the shrinking middle class, and they go back and they say, what, we went back to 68 and looked at the poorest households in the country. And what they did find is interesting in that, back in 1968, 17% of the population lived on earnings less than $15,000 a year. So you had 17% of the population that was living on 15% of the year, less than $15,000 a year. That has dropped by, according to their numbers, dropped by 4%. And those people moved into the next bracket. And so that's a good thing. The problem is, and this is where you get into this weird area. Okay, so the people at the bottom are doing a little bit better. We're getting them just above that 15,000, and I gotta wonder how many of that 4% that moved from that 15,000 up just got over, maybe by a buck or two. Because you go to the next to what's considered the middle class, and they put the middle class, and I guess you got to throw it into a number somewhere. So they've chosen the middle class as households earning between $35,000 and $75,000. I got to tell you, I don't think a middle class is 35,000, but okay, somewhere in there, 35 to 75. They've said, and this is huge, that this is enormous. So what they're saying is the bottom of the scale has moved up a little bit, just a touch. They're just up a little bit. Where it was 17% of the population living under 15,000, now it's 13%. But here's the thing: they're not moving very far, because according to the St. Louis Fed report, since the late 60s, you've seen the number of people in this middle class, this 35 to 75,000 range, you've seen them drop from 43% all the way down to 31%. And you're seeing a mass drop in the number of people in that bracket. Now, they go, oh, well, you know, the number of people who are making $75,000, that number has come close to doubling in that time frame. So, people have gotten much better, they're much more better off. So they're not in that middle class anymore. So now we're saying 75 and above is like upper middle class or lower upper class, however you want to put this. So we're saying, people in the middle class, they've jumped up. And I'm not quite sure where they're getting this, but they're saying, okay, you've got the upper end of the middle class that has done better. And then you've got the upper end, the people making $150,000 a year. They've jumped from about 2% of the population back in the 60s up to 10%. And then you can break it down even further that, you've got the 5% who've done even better still. And, what they say is, the great news is that, the Americans are generally earning more across the distribution. The bad news is that the middle class and the poor have very different upward mobilities. So I take it back to the destruction of labor unions. Those jobs that paid decent wages that were working class jobs have disappeared. And you're moving towards the two Americas. What they say is this divide has amplified income inequality as the middle class shrinks and joins the upper class while the poor stagnate. So again, we're splitting the country really in half. And I've been saying we're doing it on educational grounds. When they looked at who had the money, more than half of all of the income, more than half of all the income in the country went to the top quarter, or went to the top 20%, the top fifth. Just over a third went to the top 5%. You get the 1%, the making over $365,000 a year. They did substantially better. And then that 1% of 1% that I talked about, those making $1.6 million or more a year, they're doing it much better as well. And this article says, and the whole point of this was about talking not so much about wealth, not income inequality, but wealth inequality. Because they're saying, now what's going on is you're seeing all of this consolidation of wealth, and they're pointing it back to the fact that, working people, they don't own stocks and bonds. They don't invest in real estate because they don't have the money to do it. And it's one of these chicken or egg scenarios that, again, you look back to my grandparents who, they made decent wages throughout they were able to buy their home, they were able to squirrel away some money, and they retired with their defined benefit pension funds in a pretty decent place. Now we're in a weird place of saying, well, sorry, you don't know how to invest in stocks, so you fall behind. In the article, though, they start talking about our progressive tax code. And they say that, you've got all of these people at the very top who have all of the income. Well, they pay all of the taxes. In fact, what they write is, while these incomes are high, there is a balancing effect from the U.S. system of progressive taxation, which I completely disagree with. We need a much more progressive tax code. They point out, they say, look at the incomes groups that contribute back into society. Close to 70% of the federal tax revenue comes from the top 1/5 of the income distribution. That's because they're taking more than half of the income. They say, while within that, the top 5% paid more than 40% of all federal income taxes. The bottom fifth paid almost nothing in federal income taxes, given that the federal government transfer programs are an important source of income for this group, right? Because they're not making the wages. And you can go through this article, and they talk about the education being a huge part of this. And as I went through this, because they say, look, if you have a high school diploma, it provides about 77% of the median income that someone would need. A bachelor's degree increases median earnings by 102% over a high school diploma. Median earnings of a professional degree are 61% higher than that of a bachelor's degree. So the more education you get, the better off you'll be. Yet, what we've done in this country, and they point out that there are some 4,600 degree-granting post-secondary institutions here in the U.S. because, people have ample opportunity, they write, to pursue human capital and increase their earnings while taking on massive debt. And the final thing that I wanted to bring up is what they say is, in their conclusion, is that education, that's basically the way they go, because we are now in an era where much more wealth is accumulated through knowledge labor than through physical labor. And maybe it's just me, but I think back to when my grandfather came back from World War II, when he was making like 17 cents shoveling coal off the back of a coal truck, and he was making peanuts before unions came and raised the wages and conditions of all those workers. We're in that exact same time frame. We're in that exact same world. The difference now is, I don't see us organizing enough. I hope we will. I'm hoping we will. But it's going to take this mentality that we can fight back against this. That this whole idea of two Americas, this whole idea that we're going to have to go in through the back door, is really very flawed, and I would argue un-American. Just my thought. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Interested in your thoughts.
I got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
When I heard that our Congress critters are taking an extended vacation for all of August and part of September, I had two incongruous reactions: anger and gratitude. Gratitude because their vacation gives us a 5-week break from the spectacle of right-wing mad dogs in the House, yapping, foaming at the mouth, and running around in circles. Kill the minimum wage, they howl. Repeal Obamacare. Deport immigrant children. Reinvade Iraq. Impeach Obama. And yada, yada, yada. Yet, nutty as they are, it's also infuriating that these pampered politicos feel entitled to such a vacation. It's another sign of their total disconnect from the hard realities of the workaday majority they're supposed to serve. Earth to Congress, critters. Most American families are being hosed out of the middle class, having to work harder and longer for less pay, no benefits, and not even 2 weeks off, much less a 5-week getaway. In the spirit of fairness, though, I should concede that the current Do-Nothing House has been setting an 8-year performance record in one category of congressional activity, junketeering. Yes, not only does this bunch love to vacation, but it also tiptoes around the ethics rules so lobbyists can pay for their trips. Not since the sleaze days of pay-to-play Uber lobbyist Jack Abramoff have House members taken as many junkets financed by corporate interests. Oh, excuse me, they're called fact-finding missions, not junkets. By whatever name, nearly 1,900 of the free trips were enjoyed last year by lawmakers, their spouses, and staff, paid for by private entities seeking legislative favors. This is Jim Hightower saying, adding to the disgust, House leaders very quietly axed an ethics requirement this year that lawmakers must disclose these travel freebies in their personal financial reports. Yet they wonder why their public approval rating is in the ditch.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-888-520-RICK. That's 1-888-520-7425. Exposing GOP hypocrisy. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So yesterday we were talking about, when we were kids. I talked with John Misick, the opinion and editorial guru over at Penn Live and the Patriot News, about his article. This woman who, and we talked about it a little bit last week, this woman who had her 9-year-old daughter go play at a park while she had to go to work. Now, the kid had a cell phone, and just playing at the park. If anything were to happen, she'd pick up the phone or, hey, scream for somebody, hey, help. Just it is one of the things that I did, a million times as a kid. And I think back to some of the stuff that I got away with as a kid that would be considered, felonies, and I shouldn't even say that, federal offenses. Hopping trains and climbing fences and climbing trees and doing all the stuff now that kids aren't allowed to do. And I think about this, I can't tell you how many times when I was 9 years old, I woke up, mom went to work, and I was gone the entire day. I was at friends' houses, we were from place to place, and I lived in a really nasty, dangerous neighborhood. I honestly don't know how my mother did it. I don't know how she got up every day and said, yeah, okay, go ahead. I don't, because I can't do it with my kids. And I think it's this indoctrination we've had as a society that there's danger around every corner. And look, where I grew up, there was. But you had to learn how to deal with that. And there's part of me that says, by being these helicopter parents, what are we doing to our kids in the future? What are we training them? How are we going? There's all this anti-bullying stuff. I've been saying for years is a bad idea, because bullying doesn't stop in 7th or 8th or 10th grade. Bullying is something that happens to you every day. Whether it's a Tea Party guy screaming in your face or the guy who sits in the cubicle next to you busting your stones, it doesn't end. You have to figure out how to deal with it. So when I look at this, and this woman who was arrested because the kid was playing in the park all by herself, not hurting anybody, not in any real danger, but end up being fired, according to the latest report. And I thought so yesterday when I talked to Misick. I thought she got fired from her job. Now making things that much worse fired from her job at McDonald's. And you go, really? Are you kidding me? And as I look at this, and I've said this a million times on the welfare reform. What welfare reform should have been is not we're kicking you off of welfare, now you have to go find a job. It should have had a mechanism in it that will provide a job. And one of the jobs I've said from the beginning should have happened is a training of child care workers. Because the biggest obstacle for single mothers to get jobs, child care. My mother went through it. Granted, the 70s were much different. We were latchkey kids. It was expected that we came home, we opened the door, we went inside, we took care of ourselves until mom or dad or whoever came home. Now, my wife and I my wife just let our daughter walk about 3 blocks from her basketball camp while she was coming to pick her up. And she's like, can you get in trouble for that? I'm going, she's 12. When I was 12 years old, there were times where I was counties away, not just streets or blocks. I was counties away. And it's insane. And now you see this other story out of Scottsdale, Arizona, where back in March, a woman was arrested for almost the same thing. Left her kids in the car with the air conditioning on while she went in for a job interview. Here she's homeless. They're living in the car. So there's part of me that goes, if you're living in your car, does that matter? Because, if that's where your house is, I don't know. So she had 2 kids, 6 months old and 2 years old, that she left in the car with the air conditioning on while she went in to try and get this job that would have paid about $39,000 a year, plus the opportunity, obviously, to make more as an insurance agent with the Farmers Insurance. Needless to say, she did not get the job. In fact, she lost her job at McDonald's. Are we seeing something here? Are we seeing a pattern? 2 stories in a row, people fired from McDonald's, working for peasant wages. Are we seeing something? And I go back to this whole idea that, hello, we need to be making sure that women get child care opportunities. Now, how this woman got not going to jail because she was charged with a couple of felonies that could have resulted in a number of years in jail. And it is Maricopa County, where that sheriff idiot is from. They let her go on her commitment that she will take some parenting classes and set up a education and a child care trust fund. And I'm going, she's homeless. But you find out later that, Kickstarter has raised a boatload of money for them. I guess it was like $100,000 or something. It was a good sum of money. But here's the thing. She was supposed to set up a $10,000 trust for education and a $10,000 trust for child care. And then the case would be dismissed. And my first thought was, she's homeless. Where are you going to get $10,000 if someone's homeless? And I guess, I look at this and how many people could find themselves in that exact situation? How many people could find themselves in a situation there's just no way out of it? It's an untenable situation where I've got to go for this job interview. I tried to get a babysitter. The babysitter didn't show up. I don't know what to do. I can't call these people and say, hey, I'm not going to go there, because there are no organizations who are going to help you, which is why, again, I go back to my view that what we should have done with welfare reform is we should have created a child care system where people got jobs from. There would be a good first job. But that would come with some thought, and that would come with some caring. And the people who wrote the welfare reform bill, like the Newt Gingriches of the world, not so much. Not so much at all. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diverse Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As the National Association of Letter Carriers convenes in Philadelphia, postal workers are facing challenges ever. The USPS is outsourcing postal work, closing mail facilities, and seems to have adopted a mindset of cutting and slashing rather than maintaining the enormous postal service capacity. And Association of Letter Carriers President Scott Van Derven says that the shape of postal service reform is vital if America is to keep its postal service for generations to come.
Big elephant in the room, naturally, is postal reform legislation. And we need something that is sensible, that's not going to destroy the Postal Service in order to try and save it. Our pre-funding, we are pre-funding employee retirement health benefits 75 years into the future in a very short time span. When we start hearing about all these dollars that the Postal Service is in debt, it's really servicing that particular postal mandate. And we're talking about enormous billions of dollars. Those are the kinds of things I think we need to have our friends in Congress really understand what good postal reform would be, and that doesn't just include just lopping off huge sections of it and somehow expecting it to survive.
Van Derven says people living in rural areas, senior citizens, and low-income Americans need postal service the most, and they are the hardest hit by the cutbacks. Detroit has put a 15-day moratorium on water shutoffs to low-income Detroiters. Community activists are protesting the water shutoffs that some see as a prelude to privatization of the Motor City's water services. Betty O'Connor Rogers is vice president of the Michigan Nurses Association. Her union has joined protests against the water shutoffs because the nurses see it not only as an economic and social justice issue, but a public health issue.
We're nurses, and nurses are involved with the health, not just the people who are in hospitals or what have you, but of the community. And nurses really do need to get involved and be able to help these folks stand up for themselves. And also we, as people who live together as a community, we should be standing up for each other.
O'Connor Rogers says Detroit needs to find a solution other than just cutting off water to people who can't afford it.
You just make their situation worse. Instead of lifting them up and helping them stand up, you actually bring them more down. And that just, even on a fundamental human right issue, is just wrong.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So we've been fortunate to be hanging around here at the APW convention, talking to folks as they go by, rank and file members, some of their leadership. Early in the program, got to talk to their president, one of their executive vice presidents. We're moving all along the organization, and I'm sitting here with Sharon Stone. She's the Central Region coordinator here for APWU, the American Postal Workers Union. Sharon, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You're from Chicago, right?
Yes, I'm from Chicago.
This is kind of no good for you, right? I mean,
no, actually, I'm enjoying it. You know,
get to show off your city,
my town, right?
And we've had an absolute ball here in Chicago.
Yeah.
We've been here
city.
the whole week. I brought my 12-year-old daughter. We got to go on the big Ferris wheel on Navy Pier.
Fireworks. You see the fireworks?
From the swimming pool, yeah, we were.
Yes, great.
And there's nothing better than that, right? Sitting in the swimming pool, it could have been a hot tub. So, but I'm just being greedy, aren't I?
Yeah.
So when you look at this convention, what are you hoping for? As like every convention, you come in with ideas of how we want to change things, what we want to do as an organization, as a movement. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I'm looking forward to us coming together on a lot of the issues that are out there we need to address. We're trying to do something with the restructuring of our organization to meet the needs, that we have now. So I'm just looking forward to a lively participatory convention where everybody has a say and the majority rules.
Yeah, the saying, may you live in interesting times, is one of those things that some people, want to believe in. I got to be honest with you. I don't want to live in all that interesting at times, given what we've got and your organization has in front of you with the attempted privatization of the entire Postal Service, the destruction of service, all down the line. Really an attack on not just on your members.
It is.
And the community.
It is. We feel like they're just trying to dismantle us piece by piece. They're not successful in some ways, but then they come back and they'll sell this off or they'll privatize that part. Like the what we have now going on with Staples, we're trying to stop. We've got that with the approved shipper and CPUs, what are contract postal units, a lot of things that siphon off the opportunities for work for our employees, and they don't provide the work to postal employees.
Right.
So the workers that are doing this work, they're getting minimum wage, no benefits. Only people making money is corporate America.
Yeah, and that's the sad part in all of this.
Yeah.
And it's all of the privatization schemes. Here in the program, we talk about this quite often because, what is ours, the commons, what is ours, be it the Postal Service or in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Wine and Spirit shops, all of these things that are ours, that reap benefits for us, are being taken from us.
That's true.
And fortunately, your organization is leading the fight to say no, lead on the cutting edge of saying, you know what, we want to maintain this for not just our members, but for
their community and for the country. Postal Service is the oldest, most trusted, organized office in the country. People trust the Postal Service, and they're trying to dismantle that. We want the work to go to people that are secured, people that look at the sanctity of the mail, that are qualified, people that do the work, do the job, and can be held responsible for it. And they're trying to get rid of that piece by piece, and we're trying to stop it.
But don't you think on some level we need to be having a conversation that work should have dignity and respect of a decent wage, and that we should be having the conversation of any time we use the taxpayer's dollar or any time we have a public entity, it should be raising conditions instead of tearing them down?
I agree with that, except I should point out we don't use taxpayer money.
Which is why I said, done for by we the people.
Yeah.
I understand and completely understand. You know what? You're probably right. Because too many people, I think, do think.
They still think that.
That somehow that the Postal Service is a drain on the taxpayer.
Mm-hmm.
But here's my problem, and now that I'm thinking about it, all the news stories lately have been, well, you've defaulted on several pension payments.
They created what we consider to be an unfair rule. We have to pre-fund our pension and health benefits 75 years out.
Right.
You realize that's employees that haven't even been born yet. And that
they appreciate it, by the way.
Right. That pre-funding requirement was not there until President Bush just required it. So at some point, no, we haven't been able to do that. But if that wasn't there, the Postal Service would still be profitable.
But explain that for a second, because, that poison pill, as I call it, because it really is a poison pill. This idea that you're going to be able to, from this point forward, pre-fund 75 years in the future, which no other company, no other organization in the history of civilization has ever been required to do.
And we're supposed to do it in 10 years.
Exactly. That's the point I wanted to get to, this short period of time to be able to do this. I understand saying, we need to have a plan to make sure down the road, the 4 or 5 generations, we're covering them, but not in such a short period of time.
Right. Not only that, a lot of our work has been sold off, so when you talk to the general public, they think part of the Postal Service's problem is there's no mail. But there's $1 billion mail process out there for people, pre-sort houses.
Right.
They make billions of dollars, and that's work that we could perform and that we have the infrastructure already in place to do that work. So it's not true.
Who's Stamps.com?
Who is it?
Yeah, is it the Postal Service?
It's not. I'm not. He says it's not. I'll take that.
Because the reason I bring that up is that's something the Postal Service should be doing.
That's right.
Stamps.com should have been something the Postal Service should have been doing.
That's something we should be doing too.
And all of this stuff. I mean, there are new products that should be being developed for the Postal Service. And one of the frustrations that I have is you look at the package stuff. I mean, Congress has, and you're the expert here. I'm just my view on it. Congress has not allowed you guys to really compete with the UPSs and the FedEx, and it actually tied your hands in many ways.
In a lot of ways, the Postal Regulatory Commission is a part of that, and the Board of Governors, all of that comes into play, and they tie our hands, so we're not able to do that. We're pressing now to start doing some new things to try to bring people back to the Postal Service and bring funds back to the Postal Service. And I'm assuming if you interviewed Mark, he talked about banking, bringing banking back to the Postal Service.
I got to tell you, Sharon, no more people at the post office, please. Every time I go there, it's like they're giving stuff away. And I keep hearing this.
What do you mean giving stuff away?
There are so many people in line. It's like they're giving stuff away.
Because
it takes me an hour.
Because of their organized process of reducing the numbers, where you would have had 3 people to wait on you in that post office, it may be 1, it may be 2, and then they have to have breaks and lunch. There's no relief, and that's because of the process where they eliminate the jobs.
Yeah.
They say we have more people than we need, therefore these 2 people need to be moved. The protection we have with, the fact that our people can't be laid off, well, that's a good thing, but at some point, there's nowhere to put them.
Yeah, at some point, don't you start thinking maybe we should be having that conversation that all workers should have that protection?
Oh, we've always had that conversation.
I mean, at some point, don't you think, had that happened in 2008, do you think the collapse would have been as bad as it was? Do you think the housing market would have crashed as bad as it did if people didn't lose their jobs?
That's quite true.
Just a thought.
That's true.
And
yeah. We're from one of the few unions that still has it.
And what's frustrating to me is there's so many people who look at the Postal Service or public sector workers in general, and I know I shouldn't lump you guys together, but I do see you as public servants.
We are public servants.
So I do see that as the public sector, but the problem I see is so much of the media attention, so much of the messaging has been, well, they're just lazy, or they get these golden parachute pension funds, or they're overpaid. I think that's misguided.
It is misguided. We fought hard for the benefits and the salaries that we've had over the years. And I agree with you that all employees should have them. But because we have a union that does collective bargaining for us, we've managed to achieve that since the 70s when we got the right to bargain.
Right.
Because it's just been since then. And everyone should have that.
And
what we're saying is the more that you sell off and the more you give away, the fewer people will have jobs that allow them to make a living wage. Or benefits.
Right, and that's a whole other argument.
Especially benefits, right.
And now I'm told your
Right.
pensions, I'm told your pension system, much like the public sector, because where we're at in Pennsylvania, where we're going through this whole pension fight, much like they're doing in Illinois and Ohio and pretty much all across the country, where they've created, again, these crises.
Yeah.
Where the only option we're given, the Tina mentality, there's no alternative, we have to do this, which is destroy the pension.
Right.
End up saddling the taxpayer with massive bond debt, and of course then moving stuff to Wall Street.
Yeah.
Which all 3 are, in my view, horrible.
Terrible ideas.
The worst
right.
ideas possible.
Right. And the downside of that is the employees, when you make changes to their pension plan, they did what they were supposed to do.
Right.
They paid their money every pay. But the people that are taking care of their money and supposed to be making sure it's there, they use it for other things. So, and then all of a sudden the fund is short, and we have to suffer for that. The employees do.
Yeah.
And at least we don't have that.
No, I'm told your pension fund, and the reason I brought it up, because I think there's a point of clarification. Your pension fund is actually fully funded, if I understand right.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm told that there's actually a surplus in there.
I don't know about the surplus.
So from a political standpoint, maybe our politicians could steal that.
They try. I don't know. I always thought part of our protection is Congress on the same pension plan we are?
Yeah, that's a good question. But here again, if you're going to be treated like another business, maybe we should get Congress out of your business.
We wish we could. But right now, we have to do what every other lobby has to do. We have to lobby Congress. We want something written into a bill. We have to do the same thing everybody else does.
Right.
We don't have as much clout as some of the big corporations with the $1 billion in their funds. We just don't have it. Plus, our particular union, we're bound by rules. Our fund is called COPA, but there's what can be donated, what cannot, still some federal guidelines. Yeah.
There's an entire department of the federal government that looks over you, the Department of Labor.
Yes.
There's no Department of Business that oversees them.
Or employees. Right.
So let me ask you a last line of questioning. Out of this convention, obviously, you're going to do your networking and you're going to take classes and learn some new ideas, how to engage younger workers and how to organize better and do all those things. What's your hope of coming out of this for not just your members but your union and really the society as a whole?
Well, I hope to come out of this with us being pulled together, all on the same page with what's important and what we need to next, and to be able to present the ideals to the community so we can get their support, because we can't win this fight without the community's support. They're going to be harmed as well when all of these things go away. In some neighborhoods, the post office is all you have.
Yeah. No,
You know?
I know. Look, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland.
Yeah.
The post office was there, and that was probably the only bit of stability in that neighborhood.
That's right.
And sadly, if we allow it to go away, that last bit of stability will go with it. And which is why I'm so in favor of the idea of having banking services in the postal service, in the post offices, because it will give those communities an opportunity to do some banking without having to go to loan sharks or worse than loan sharks, those check cashing places.
Yes, they are.
I mean,
and you know what I think some people don't realize, if you live in the suburbs or some community where you can draft everywhere you need to go, you don't realize what other people face when they don't have the opportunity to get there because they don't have any way to do it. They're stuck with what's in their community.
There you go. Sharon Stone, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
It's time for the world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. The UN Security Council met yesterday and voted unanimously in favor of granting investigators access to the crash site of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 in eastern Ukraine. The foreign ministers of the Netherlands and Australia were on hand for the special session. Between them, the two countries were home to more than 3/4 of Flight 17's 298 casualties. Speaking after the vote, here is Dutch Foreign Minister Frans Timmermans.
The demise of almost 200 of my compatriots has left a hole in the heart of the Dutch nation. It has caused grief, anger, and despair. To my dying day, I will not understand that it took so much time for the rescue workers to be allowed to do their difficult jobs, and that human remains should be used in the political game.
EU foreign ministers met today to weigh cutting off all military exports to Russia. And you'll hear about it here if and when they make their next move. Heavy fighting consumes the Libyan capital, Tripoli, with the city's international airport serving as the front line between rival militias from the cities of Misrata and Zintan. After days of gunfire and shelling, 90% of the planes at the airport have been destroyed. And for now, the Libyan government lacks the means and its soldiers the will to intervene and guard critical infrastructure points. Last week, the Libyan government asked the UN to send military advisors to stabilize the situation, but citing security concerns, the UN instead decided to pull out its staffers from the country. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about a founding father who was a major political player, remembered for only one small thing. Elbridge Gerry established himself as an early rebel against British taxation and other oppressive acts. He was elected to the Massachusetts Assembly and then served in the Second Continental Congress when the Revolutionary War occupied his interest. Later, he was selected as a delegate to the U.S. Constitutional Convention, where he distinguished himself as one of only 3 delegates that refused to sign the Constitution. He had signed the original Articles of Confederation and the Declaration of Independence, but demanded a Bill of Rights stating individual liberties for American citizens, or he would not sign. As we all know now, he eventually got those Bill of Rights in the form of the first 10 amendments. Join us again for the only thing he was remembered for. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. when you rode an elevator and an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
$25 bill now, $30, 30 bill, give me 30, make it 30 bill, mama, $30 bill, give me 30, who's the $30 bill? $30 bill now, 35.
Yeah, just think about it. Think about how much money can be made if we privatize the post office. Think about how much money we could make if we just sell off the land. I mean, because if you go around and you look at all the prime real estate that the post offices have, man, there's a lot. And you put that in the hands of profiteers, oh boy. And for me, I look at this and I go, I cannot believe on any level that we're even considering it. But we are. I mean, there's a very real push to destroy, and not just, it's not the post office that gets me. It's all of this, the lottery, the wine and spirit shops, you name it, things that we used to do for ourselves. And, while I was in Chicago, I had the opportunity to talk to a guy who had done a lot of research into the privatization of public transportation. And then the reprivatization, and then the taking back of the commons, and the swinging back and forth. And he said, all of this stuff hinges, all of the privatization of things that we should be doing collectively, because there are things we can't do individually. The whole privatization, all of this stuff hinges on one thing. That's the willingness of the taxpayer to go to their government and say, we need that service, bail them out. We need banking, we need transportation, we need roads and bridges, we need, whatever, healthcare, whatever, we need these things. So when they get themselves into trouble, they know they can fall back on the taxpayer. And he walked me through the whole privatization of transportation because, as I've said on this program a number of times, and I think some people are already tired of it, they get it. You're right, Rick. We've never privatized anything that's done us any good. And I agree with that. There has been nothing that we've privatized where what we were told actually came true. That we would have a better service, a more efficient service, a cheaper service, that we would get all of the gold and honey and all of that. It just hasn't happened. And he walked me through the genesis of public transportation and how at one point, we had started doing it. It was privatized because, it was the belief, that the robber barons could do it better because they were smarter and they were more efficient and they could crack the whip. So we privatized all of the transportation lines. And in Cleveland, where I lived, they had trolley cars that came from different parts of the city that you could take in, and you had to pay for it. You paid the cost. There wasn't any state money or federal money that went into it. And what they found is that, there were booms and busts. There were times where ridership was high and you made good money, and there were times not so much. And so what ended up happening was they made their money off of, we're not going to continue to upgrade the stuff. We're not going to continue to fix, and we're just going to let things crumble, especially the roadways. And what ended up happening is people went to their government and said, hey, we need this service. We need this. We have to have it. I got to get to work. It's good for our community. We'll put some tax money to it. And it's kind of like that first blink. As soon as you do it once, as soon as you open the door and they know they've got you, they've got you. And we started funding it. And then, of course, the automotive industry started buying it up and running it into the ground. But as soon as these businesses get that, and we're doing the exact same thing with our roads and bridges, all this push towards public-private partnerships, all of this push towards, we need private money to do this stuff because they know what's best. No, they don't. I went across the Indiana Turnpike. I went over the Chicago Skyway. You see what and it's foreign ownership, not even just private. It's private foreign ownership. I think it's a Spanish and an Australian company that have joint interest in the company that actually runs it. And to be honest, I thought Pennsylvania had the worst roads in the country. And maybe collectively they do. But none were as bad, as I can recall, as bad as the Indiana Turnpike was. And that, we were told, was going to be so much better. The folks there, and I asked, it was going to be much better. The roads were going to be paved. Everything was going to be wonderful. And we're talking, what is it, 6-8 years now? Profit's okay. When the Easy Pass thing that I finally broke down and purchased didn't work, and I pulled up to the Easy Pass lane, and she's like, well, where'd you have it? On the dashboard. Well, it's not fixed properly, so we're going to charge you an extra $1. Whoa. And what are you going to do? Are you going to fight a foreign corporation? No, you lose. So I look at this stuff, and I go back to, is this whole privatization movement what we the people want? And I get emails from people, countless emails from people going, how do we stop it? How do we stop the globalization? How do we stop these insane free trade agreements? How do we stop the bleeding of the taxpayer? How do we stop all of the negative things that I talk about here on the program, whether it's giving the massive amounts of corporate welfare, whether it's handing off all of the things that we own for a pittance, whether it's trade agreements that encourage outsourcing of jobs? How do you change it? What do we do? What we've always done. We organize. We come together as a community and we say, no. We elect politicians. And look, I'm a firm believer in the political process. Not like some of the people who have this fantasy, this X-rated fantasy in their mind of how they're going to be the Jeffersonian image of the patriot watering the tree of liberty with the blood of tyrants. No, come on, it's not going to happen. You change the process through the process. That means you have to be educated, activated, engaged. That means you've got to be part of it. And I know people love to complain and carry on, but that's the way we change things. You got to vote. Come November, all of these people who have basically held our state hostage, who have held our country hostage, should be gone. Exercise your right to a term limits. We have that, We have term limits in this country. It's called your right to vote. Throw the bums out. And for me, the Postal Service, one of those defining grounds, public education, one of those defining grounds. Our parks, our recreation places, part of the defining moments of our time. Or is it that we want to live in an environment where we have people who privatize everything? Let's go to the phone line, see who we got on line one. Welcome to the Rick Smith Show. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind is anything you'd like to talk about. This is Erwin Aronson.
Hey, Erwin. Let me get back with you. Got to take a quick break here.
You got it.
Right back after this. Stick around.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
It really looked like, the cauldron of hell.
Record wildfires burn 1 million acres in the Pacific Northwest. It's official. June 2014 was the hottest June on record. EPA moves to block massive Pebble Mine in Alaska. Plus,
Hey, where's the beef?
want to cut your emissions? Then cut out that hamburger.
Do I have to?
Do you care about the planet?
Oh, now you're playing the Care About the Planet card, eh? All of that and much more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Carbon dioxide is actually a benefit to the world, and so were the Jews.
Yeah. Wait, what? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, that guy, carbon dioxide is good, and so are the Jews. We also played a clip from him last week on CNBC saying,
you don't believe in climate change at all. You made a comment.
Just a minute. I believe in climate change.
Sir,
Shut up.
Shut up. So who the hell is that guy, and what the hell is he talking about?
Yeah, that's William Happer. He's a professor with no discernible experience in climate science. He is paid by a free market think tank that denies climate change and is partly funded by, surprise, ExxonMobil and the Koch brothers.
And his connection, apparently he's compared carbon dioxide to the Holocaust or something?
Yes, he's basically said that carbon dioxide has been demonized the same way that Jews were demonized during the Holocaust in World War II or something like that.
So he was called a denier, and he takes offense because people who deny the Holocaust are called deniers, and oh, it's a whole lot of crazy. I'm glad they give him airtime over on CNBC. Anyway, what kind of real news do you have for us today, Des?
Well, first,
It really looked like, the cauldron of hell. You can see flames everywhere you looked.
a break in the weather is finally helping firefighters who are battling record wildfires across Washington, Oregon, and Western Canada. In Washington state, the Carlton Complex fire is now the largest wildfire in state history, burning an area 4 times larger than Seattle, destroying at least 200 homes.
With this kind of heat and wind, it looks like Eastern Washington's going to burn to the ground.
As of July, in Washington state, the total burn area from numerous fires is already more than the yearly average over the last decade, and fire season's only about a week old. Meanwhile, it's official. June 2014 was the hottest June ever recorded on the planet since record-keeping began in 1880.
Impossible. I have been told by global warming deniers that the planet has been cooling over the past 17 years.
Yeah, well, not according to the annual State of the Climate report from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This hottest June on record follows the hottest May on record for the planet. That's 2 months in a row that the planet has broken all-time heat records.
For the record, I deny that.
Well, the report also confirms that the world's oceans are absorbing much of the heat trapped by greenhouse gas emissions, and that's raising ocean temperatures not just to a record high for the month of June. NOAA says that these were the hottest ocean temperatures ever recorded. Ever. This past spring, levels of heat-trapping carbon dioxide in the atmosphere passed 400 parts per million for the first time in human history and have now stayed above that level. In California, 2013 was the hottest and driest year for the state on record, and in the midst of that record drought, state regulators have ordered an emergency shutdown of 11 oil and gas wastewater injection wells because they could be polluting groundwater. In the past, the state allowed the oil industry to intentionally pollute some groundwater aquifers to dispose of toxic drilling waste because they didn't think those aquifers would ever be tapped. Now the state is in record unending drought. ProPublica says the state was so lax in oversight that the oil companies very likely have also polluted protected aquifers. Want to reduce your carbon footprint?
No.
Well, for those who do, you can do it by cutting out beef. According to a new study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, beef production has the biggest environmental impact of all livestock production. Researchers studying the entire process from farm to supermarket found that eggs, pork, and poultry were all about equivalent in environmental impact, but beef generates 10 times the environmental impact and has the highest carbon emissions. Finally, score one for salmon. In Alaska, the EPA has proposed new restrictions for water pollution that would effectively block the development of the controversial proposed Pebble mine.
The EPA has denied them their license to mine?
Well, sort of, but not outright. They put a cap on how many miles of streams and wetlands can be destroyed in the headwaters of Bristol Bay, the world's largest salmon fishery.
Yeah, sounds like the EPA is a denier to me. For much more on those stories and all the other ones we denied you, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, and you can find and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Shut up.
When it feels this
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We need to stand united, for undivided we shall never fall. Remember all, we need to trust in and then forever call our brothers and our sisters, and all you and I are in. You and I both know that we can rely on it. The time is prime, planets aligning, no mistaking. For union resurrection, the anger has awakened. The sleeping giant, come on, yeah, we can do it. We need to revive, re-amp, and re-up the labor movement. Anything in life.
Isn't that the truth? Lots of organizing, lots of getting into the streets. Worker to worker, neighbor to neighbor, family member to family member, absolutely, without question, we need to re-amp and revamp the labor movement. Thanks for being here. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm sitting here with our good friend Omar Gonzalez. He's the Western Regional Coordinator for APWU, the guy who was gracious enough to say, hey, come over and talk with us. Omar, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, by all means. You know, God is good and things happen for a reason. Here you are, same old city I'm at. Couldn't plan better.
Absolutely, and we couldn't miss the opportunity to come out and talk with you and others in your union, because you guys have a lot of actions, a lot of in the streets, a lot of the stuff that here on the program we've been talking about.
That's right. You know, and I tell you, I know you've talked to quite a few people you've interviewed. They've come up, said some good things about the questions that you posed and the comments that you've made. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here too, just face to face with you.
Yeah, it's great meeting you. You've been on the program a number of times, and we've never actually met face to face. So this is a nice change of pace, if you will.
Yes.
So, you know, in looking at this convention, I mean, this is an excellent opportunity to obviously do some networking and obviously some education. Out of this, what are you hoping comes out of it?
Well, the thing, hopefully we leave this convention more united than we've come in. We have some internal issues, as most organizations do, whether labor or any other organization. We hope to take care of, you know, the internal issues, but more than anything else, we want to leave this convention on solid footing, united against the true enemies. And we have two. I see it as two enemies within our organization. One is, of course, management and the corporate elite, but the other one is apathy. And, you know, the apathy of too many of our rank and file members believe, oh, you know, let the union take care of it. They don't realize they're the union.
Exactly.
You know, they've got to get agitated, motivated, and everything else. So we got that task in front of us as well. We got a little slice, about 2,100 and so delegates, all here for the same purpose. A lot of spirited debate is going to go on, I'm sure, a lot of passion. But more than anything else, as postal workers, as we leave, will be united to take on that fight.
It's like any family. You're going to have your internal squabbles. You don't air your laundry outside, but once you get outside, you're all one family.
I can tell you some stories about my cousin, but we won't go there.
And please don't, because this is a PG-13 show.
Okay.
So, you know, in looking at this, you know, we've talked about the Staples situation, which I don't think most people really understand the gravity of it. I don't think most people they think, oh, okay, we're just doing something that's going to be convenient, and, you know, it'll be there if we need it, but we'll always have this post office to fall back on. But that's not necessarily the case.
Absolutely not the case. In fact, the plot and planning of the Staples situation was basically to replace the post offices, to close them within 2 miles away. Now they've come up and they say, oh, well, we're going to end the pilot, we're going to make them providers, but they won't show us, they just won't show us the documents that show that. Okay, but why make it secret? If it's just a provider program, and like any other mom and pop store, show us the documents. So you're not entitled to the documents. Then it's not over. The
then you
fight's
just
not over.
changed the name.
Oh yeah. We had meetings with the Postmaster General's deputies and whatnot, and they basically wanted, take the victory lap. You won. No, we didn't. This fight is not just Staples. This fight is about saving the institution of the United States Postal Service, the People's Post Office. And it's a struggle that we have. We're going to continue to have because people want to dismantle it because it makes money.
Right. I've had the opportunity to speak to a number of people here, from the rank and file to elected officials, all the way through your organization. And the one thing that, and in your voice as well, that is extremely apparent, that is right out there in front, is the passion that you guys have for this institution.
That's correct. That's correct. I'm still a postal worker. I've been in the post office for 33 years. It's a great institution. It actually is a marvelous system when you actually look how the mail is processed, delivered. It's just a marvelous system. We process 40% of the world's mail. It works, and it's pretty cheap, relatively speaking.
No, it's really cheap. I mean, less than, what is it, 50 cents?
That's right, less
to
than
send
50
a letter
cents.
across the country. I know people who live in other countries. It's more than double that.
That's right. You can't buy a Coke for that much.
No, at least not here in Chicago.
No, definitely not in Chicago. But so people want to dismantle it, and they do all kinds of things. The internet's killing us. It's not. Actually, the internet's helping us boost our revenue by packaging. You can't text a package. We continue to have millions and millions of dollars of money orders that are sold over the counter. If they let us expand, if they let us actually put the efforts into allowing for more services, it'll thrive even more.
Because, it's interesting you bring that up, because the argument for putting them in the Staples store is that you have more access to other things. So wouldn't the opposite argument being allow us to do more things in the post office?
Absolutely. Bring the people that normally will go to Staples, bring them over to the post office.
Maybe start selling office supplies.
And some rulers and whatnot. Seriously, and that's the issue with the bankers. The bankers are saying, oh, no, we can't have banking in the post office because, we are the banking institution and all that stuff. Now, these are the people that ran us to the ground, right? But the fact is that if you let us produce more services for the American people, and we have 32,000 post offices all over the country and stuff. We have more post offices than they have banks, for that matter. Let us expand services, Notary Public, all these things that we could do for the public. It'll be an amazing way of the federal government to connect with the people. After all, it's It's the government of the people. Let the people thrive.
No, we can't do that. See, now understand the 30-year attack on government, 30-year attack on saying government is bad, 30 years of saying that they can do nothing right and they're incompetent. If you go and do what you're saying, all that work out the window.
Well, you just look at some of the buildings that we have in the communities that are post office. It's a majestic building, and it's intended to be like way because it's the federal presence in the community. And and you're right. I mean, people want to tear it down because you got to tear down the government. You can't have big government. Big government is the people. But and then what amazes me, I tell you, Rick, people run for Congress, right? They run for Congress to be part of the government that they're trying to dismantle.
I love that.
That is amazing to
and
me.
What's amazing to me is that people vote for them.
Absolutely.
You're going to go, I'm against the government. I don't think they could do anything right, and I'm going to show you when I get there.
So vote for me to go into the government. It is, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people that buy into and drink the Kool-Aid and get poisoned. But it's a free country. They want to think that way. It's a free country.
The sad reality is the money's behind that. I mean, since Citizens United, the amount of money that's gone into politics is just mind-blowing. And you think about it. My grandfather always had a saying. He said, if a rich guy's going to pull a buck out of his pocket to tell you you don't need something, you better spend two to get it.
Absolutely.
Because they understand return on investment.
Absolutely.
So if they're pouring all this money into destroying the post office and privatizing, they've got to know that there's a jewel there.
They're not called fat cats for nothing.
So as you said, you have 32,000 post offices. And my original take, and we've had this conversation, is that this is a massive land grab. Aside from the ripoff of all of the other things, pitting things off. This is a massive land grab. 32,000 pieces of property. Those are just the post offices. Those aren't the expansive distribution centers that they're closing down to make service worse. It isn't all of the infrastructure. To me, that's what the real plot
There's
is.
money in land. We have a lot of land. You know, and the Postal Service said, well, we're going to sell it cheap. But the amazing thing is they've hired a company to do it that is selling the property cheap to their own clients.
Yeah.
And it is. I mean, you know, Trump buys the post office? Give me a break.
You know, what happened to the days when, you know, we invested in big, beautiful, in Allentown, there used to be a really amazingly beautiful post office with murals and tile work, and it was a place of, it was an inspiring and awe-inspiring place.
Absolutely. And some of those were built, and the artwork in them was meant because the people had no money. They can actually go and see quality art on the walls of the federal government's post office.
What does that say about us, that now the best thing we can come up with, we're going to put it in the Staples?
Absolutely. And it's frightening. And, you know, during our Staples campaign, we've had people come, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, good people, they turned around and said, I'm not going in that store. The bad, they didn't, well, I still got to go in there and buy, but don't worry, I won't buy a stamp. But the ugly were like, they blamed everything on Obama. So he said, Obama? What does Obama got to do with it? But you know what I said? You know what? I said, I'm going to test these people. I said, hey, but you know, Obama's the one who put the post office in the Staples. Oh, I ain't going in there. That was amazing to me. It had nothing to do with reality, rationalism, or anything like that. They were just anti-president, and that's pretty sad.
That's kind of twisted.
It is. It is.
You know, it's just, well, not surprising though. So again, as we come out of this, the idea is we're going to continue to fight against the privatization and the profitization of the post office, and I hope bring back some unity, not just with postal workers, but workers in general.
Well, I don't know if you see all the piece on the Wall Street Journal and some of the other pieces where they said that the Staples fight, we've won. The Staples unions have won. And so they're trying to say, okay, it's over. No, it's not. If anything, to have our sister unions within the post office itself unite was good. But to have the teachers and the county workers all get behind us and be able to rally over saving their government's post office, that was amazing. And people are afraid of it. The powers that be are afraid of having a revived labor movement over something as simple as put a post office in Staples and close my post office. And it's great. It's really good.
Whatever the spark is that gets people into the street, I'm with it.
Yeah, I'll tell you how good it was. I got to meet you.
And as well as I got to meet you.
There you go.
Omar, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
By all means. Thank you, Rick.
Let's take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The refrigerator's bare and the bills are creeping through the door. It's desperate times, so desperate measures we explore. Marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, where's our government? Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Bought billions off our backs, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money. We work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations. It's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
When I heard that our Congress critters are taking an extended vacation for all of August and part of September, I had two incongruous reactions: anger and gratitude. Gratitude because their vacation gives us a 5-week break from the spectacle of right-wing mad dogs in the House, yapping, foaming at the mouth, and running around in circles. Kill the minimum wage, they howl. Repeal Obamacare. Deport immigrant children. Reinvade Iraq. Impeach Obama. And yada, yada, yada. Yet, nutty as they are, it's also infuriating that these pampered politicos feel entitled to such a vacation. It's another sign of their total disconnect from the hard realities of the workaday majority they're supposed to serve. Earth to Congress, critters. Most American families are being hosed out of the middle class, having to work harder and longer for less pay, no benefits, and not even 2 weeks off, much less a 5-week getaway. In the spirit of fairness, though, I should concede that the current Do Nothing House has been setting an 8-year performance record in one category of congressional activity, junketeering. Yes, not only does this bunch love to vacation, but it also tiptoes around the ethics rules so lobbyists can pay for their trips. Not since the sleaze days of pay-to-play Uber lobbyist Jack Abramoff have House members taken as many junkets financed by corporate interests. Oh, excuse me, they're called fact-finding missions, not junkets. By whatever name, nearly 1,900 of the free trips were enjoyed last year by lawmakers, their spouses, and staff, paid for by private entities seeking legislative favors. This is Jim Hightower saying, adding to the disgust, House leaders very quietly axed an ethics requirement this year that lawmakers must disclose these travel freebies in their personal financial reports. Yet they wonder why their public approval rating is in the ditch.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So tomorrow is going to mark the 5th anniversary of the last time the minimum wage has been raised 5 years ago. 5 years ago. Has not been raised in 5 years. It went up $7.25 an hour tomorrow, 5 years ago. And there are a number of folks who are going to take the challenge, who have taken the challenge to live on minimum wage. We talked a little bit yesterday about Ted Strickland, the former governor of Ohio, now the president of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and his trials and tribulations on how he makes it on just $77 a week. For food and entertainment, if you will. And he went through the whole. I wanted to go down the street and I saw people having a beer and I would like to, but I didn't have any money in my pocket. And I look at this and I go, it's nice. It's nice that he knows what it's like to have eggs on toast or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something like that. But again, it's a very short period of time, and the people who really need to be doing these things are not the Ted Stricklands of the world. They're not the Jan Schakowskis of the world, or the Keith Ellisons, or the Tim Ryans, who have all taken this challenge. It's the people who have. It's the Mitch McConnells. It's the Boehners. It's those groups. But even then, and I've said this before. Even then, it's not enough to do it for a week or a month. It's these folks' realities. And as we talked earlier, the number of people at the very bottom, the below 15,000 a year number, that number has shrunk. But to be honest, how many people are under the 17,000 or 18,000? And can you exist on that in this country? And that's the question. And while we talk an awful lot about the middle class, I'm worried about what happens to the entire working class of this country. Where we talk about locking people up because they can't get childcare to go for a job interview. Where we're locking people up because they don't have childcare because the wages they earn doesn't cover it. And the question then becomes, and I think about this often. I saw this story from Bolivia that made me go, maybe this is where we're heading. Bolivia just lowered the legalized work age for children. Now 10-year-olds can go to work. It used to be 12, lowered it down to 10. And you go, why would you do that? Well, the poverty rate in the country is just out of this world. According to UNICEF, more than 500,000 children are already working in Bolivia. Because look, you got families who aren't making it. Evidently, you got families getting by on about 60 cents a day in parts of Bolivia. You've got some 10.5 million people living in poverty, in extreme poverty. And you look at this study, according to the Associated Press, a 2008 study that showed that 9 out of 10 children between the ages of 5 and 17 were working in some of the country's most unsafe jobs. Sugarcane harvesting, underground mining, and you go, as a world, as a globe, is this what we're going to allow to happen? Because, as I've said, if you're going to allow it to happen in one place, eventually you have another place that is forced to do it. In order to compete, you've got to do it. And then how long before it comes here? We went through this time. We went through this period where kids had to work in order to have the family to survive. We did. Turn of the 20th century, this is what reality was. My grandfather told me stories. They'd have to get up in the morning and go down to the coal yard and help shovel coal off the coal cars so that they could take a couple bits of coal home to heat the house. Are we going to return to those days? Because the whole idea, in my view, and maybe I'm just wrong in all of this, but the whole idea is that at least I'm told, of these trade agreements and all of this international aid is to make sure that kids get the education. Because understand, as we talked about earlier, we have this income inequality in this country that they're blaming on educational opportunities. The higher your education, the more money you're going to make. And look, once everybody has, because there was a point, remember when they were saying, well, you have to get a high school diploma. Well, then everyone got one. And everyone had one. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where everyone's going to have a college degree, and everyone's got one. But you're still doing who knows what, menial jobs. You're still working in the low-wage economy. Because I know people with communications degrees from pretty reputable schools who are working in the retail sector, who are working in fast food. Because there are no other jobs out there. So I look at this and I ask the question, are we moving backwards? Is this a good thing? It's now you got 10-year-olds. And will you see a number of companies move to Bolivia to take advantage of the cheap child labor? That's the other thing. I'm kind of torn. I get the idea that you need extra income into the family. I don't think you need to be taking kids out of school to do it. Now, according to reports, children in these rural areas, they get about 4.2 years of schooling. 1 in 7 children in Bolivia don't complete the primary school. 1 in 7. So you go back and you think about this whole idea that countries do better, that workers do better with more education. Is this, as a nation, do you think a good idea for Bolivia to do? And when does it eventually come around to other places? Now remember, Bolivia is still one of the poorest countries in South America. Its economy grew by an estimated 6.5%. Big growth for the region, but where does it go? And again, you go back and you look at this stuff and you go, when you see these, and this is kind of what that St. Louis Fed report was about. Yeah, we have income inequality problems, but we're not as bad as Bolivia. Yeah, we have income inequality problems, but we're not as bad as everybody else. Which I think is kind of a dumb way of looking at it. And I hope in my lifetime or my kids' lifetime we don't see us going, well, we've got to compete with Bolivia now. Seems kind of ridiculous. And I'm of the mindset that at some point the International Labor Organization's got to do something on the international level. There's got to be something here that says, you know, we don't want 10-year-olds working in mines. We don't want children, doing these kind of dangerous jobs. Just a thought. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. Make sure you pick up the app for the phone, The Rick Smith Show. I'll take a quick break, right back with Hour 3. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The first kick that took us when I hit the ground. End up like a dog that's been beat too much till you spend half your life just to cover it up now. Born in the USA, I was born in the USA, I was born in
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. As the National Association of Letter Carriers convenes in Philadelphia, postal workers are facing some of the most serious challenges ever. The USPS is outsourcing postal work, closing mail facilities, and seems to have adopted a mindset of cutting and slashing rather than maintaining the enormous Postal Service capacity and network. Wisconsin State Association of Letter Carriers President Scott Van Derven says that the shape of Postal Service reform is vital if America is to keep its Postal Service for generations to come.
Big elephant in the room, naturally, is postal reform legislation. And we need something that is sensible, that's not going to destroy the Postal Service in order to try and save it. Our pre-funding, we are pre-funding employee retirement health benefits 75 years into the future in a very short time span. When we start hearing about all these dollars that the Postal Service is in debt, it's really servicing that particular postal mandate. And we're talking about enormous billions of dollars. Those are the kinds of things I think we need to have our friends in Congress really understand what good postal reform would be, and it doesn't just include just lopping off huge sections of it and somehow expecting it to survive.
Van Derven says people living in rural areas, senior citizens, and low-income Americans need Postal Service the most, and they are the hardest hit by the cutbacks. Detroit has put a 15-day moratorium on water shutoffs to low-income Detroiters. Community activists are protesting the water shutoffs that some see as a prelude to privatization of the Motor City's water services. Betty O'Connor Rogers is vice president of the Michigan Nurses Association. Her union has joined protests against the water shutoffs because the nurses see it not only as an economic and social justice issue, but a public health issue.
We're nurses, and nurses are involved with the health, not just the people who are in hospitals or what have you, but of the community. And nurses really do need to get involved and be able to help these folks stand up for themselves. And also we, as people who live together as a community, we should be standing up for each other.
O'Connor Rogers says Detroit needs to find a solution other than just cutting off water to people who can't afford it.
You just make their situation worse. Instead of lifting them up and helping them stand up, you actually bring them more down. And that just, even on a fundamental human right issue, is just wrong.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
As to what to do for the housing industry specifically, and are the things that you can do to encourage housing. One is, don't try and stop the foreclosure process. Let it run its course and hit the bottom, allow investors to buy homes, put renters in them, fix the homes up, and let it turn around and come back up. The Obama administration has slow walked the foreclosure processes that have long existed, and as a result, we still have a foreclosure overhang.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. So, Coalition, the Housing for All Coalition, they've put out a new study. They pointed out that, you know what, like Mitten said, you know, we're gonna take those houses back. We're going to get the foreclosures. We're gonna, you know, that foreclosure overhang. We're gonna take those houses back from people. We're gonna give them to investors, and they're gonna rent them back. And everything will be amazing. Everything will be wonderful. Things will be great. Take care of the whole problem. Kick those freeloaders out of their houses and rent them back for a good profit. So we did that, right? And evidently a couple 100,000 houses have been sold off to Blackstone, a major Wall Street hedge fund company. Other Wall Street firms have bought up, you know, in excess of 200,000, and there's more. There's more in the works. And so what this group did, with this coalition, Housing for All, did is they did a little survey. And, you know, they surveyed, you know, a number of tenants in Los Angeles and in the Riverside, California area. And, you know, they came up with some information. And what they found out was not surprising. You know, that things weren't being done properly. As the one, you know, the roofs were leaking, bathroom problems, just all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't expect. That you would think that these folks who were the institutional investors, that they would think that, you know, we want to take care of our investment. But I guess when you get them for rock bottom prices, when, as Pat Toomey said, you know, you had this harder down, you kind of gotta go, wow. And we were supposed to have the author of the study on the program to talk about the findings, but again, you know, you go with this weird phone system I've got, just doesn't seem to want to work. So the question then becomes, you know, is this the direction we should be going? Institutional slumlords, at a time when we don't have enough people who to oversee, to inspect, to make sure that renters have rights. And you look at the maintenance problems that, according to this report, which offers what they're saying, a glimpse into what Wall Street's this experiment has done. Maintenance problems, you know, these absentee landlords, unaffordable rents, illegally high security deposits. And, you know, we've heard this all before. Who's going to do something about it? Because these are generally the people who are at the margin. These are generally the folks who, you know, unfortunately, they're part of the economy that's been left behind. These are the folks who probably, honestly, are still struggling from the 2008 collapse. And every day we're still hearing more about foreclosures still going on, still the abuses. And you know, what the banks, I think, learned in all of this, and this is what bothers me, and this is what, you know, we talked about just a bit ago, when you looked at the privatization of, you know, just about anything. Once the investor class realized that the working class was willing to subsidize them, once they figured out that we were willing to make sure that they were taken care of, they abused it. And this housing situation is another one of those situations, I think. You know, we sold off these houses, you know, at dirt prices, in places that had been abandoned for, you know, year, 2, 3. And they didn't do anything to fix them up. You know, when as we were going back from Chicago, and we were going to head to Detroit for Netroots Nation, you know, some of the contacts I have in Detroit were saying, you know, there are neighborhoods that are literally abandoned, and they're literally willing to give houses away if you'll pay the taxes and if you'll do some work on the houses. Now, what you've got is you'll have these institutional investors who will buy these kind of properties up, not in Detroit, but in other places. Not do any work. You know, they'll slap, you know, like any slumlord, they'll slap a patch on something and get someone into it. and you find you've got leaky roofs. You find you've got heating problems. You find that the windows are broken. The electrical's substandard. You find all of these situations where according to these reports that I see, where you have these situations where what does a renter do? Now, the industry, the industry is going to say, no, that's not how things actually are. Everything's wonderful, and we're doing the best that we can possibly do. And what would you expect them to say? Yeah, we're slumlords. That's what we do. And look, I've known slumlords throughout my life. It's all about the bottom line. It's not about the properties. It's about how much money can I get out of it. And imagine that. I knew a guy who probably owned like 10 or 15 properties, and that was his gig. He was a slumlord. Imagine owning 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000. This is the Romney plan, and this is where we're going. This is the Obama plan as well. I mean, it's what we've allowed to happen. We're institutionalizing it. And I guess the question is, from a public policy standpoint, is this a good thing? Or would it have been a better thing to keep people in their homes, not kick them to the curb, not go through this whole song and dance? I'm not quite sure. What's frustrating, though, is I look at all of the money that we gave to Wall Street, all the money that the bankers have extorted us out of over the last several years, and I know we can do better than this. Can't we? I mean, on some level, can't we do better than this? Is this the best we're able to do? Now, according to the story, investigators found that people who lost their homes to Blackstone in foreclosures had lived in those homes for longer than 10 years. 7 out of 10 of the Blackstone properties, the report identified in Riverside, were bought through the foreclosure, compared to 33% in southern Los Angeles. I look at this, people in their homes more than 10 years. And I guess, I guess it is the way we're heading. So, because I'm struggling with this, because, I remember as a kid, I remember my mother having rented places. When the first place we got out of the project was really my first experience with an actual slumlord. And he was, I remember the guy was, just one of the most unsavory characters that I think I've ever met. And in fact, after my mother passed away, they were in there picking through our stuff. They had locked the doors, and basically grave robbers. And I guess having Wall Street do that, I guess isn't that big of a jump. So maybe it is the right way to go. Maybe it is the direction that we need as a nation to pursue, right? Because it is all about just picking the bones dry. It is all about the bottom line. And look, I don't think anyone's surprised. And I remember when Romney said, we need to get those people out of their houses and sell them to Wall Street. I remember going, what's going to happen? And this survey, this study doesn't surprise me at all. I wish we had the author to talk about it, but no luck there. Just an interesting report. I'm curious your thoughts, your stories. How do you feel about this? I'm not surprised. But then again, I guess it's being jaded, having seen these kind of things so often, that nothing that Wall Street does anymore surprises me. Nothing that the CEO class does surprises me on really any level. Because it's about the bottom line. It's about the greed. It's about it's about them. So I guess nothing surprises me anymore. A good gun story. You need a gun story? Gun story to lift you up, encourage you. Maybe there's hope for tomorrow. Good gun story. No, not really. The open carry people, always good for a good laugh, right? They decided it'd be a good idea to head to Dealey Plaza for their open carry demonstration. Yes, that Dealey Plaza. Decided they're going to go out and do some gun toting. And I guess, I got to be honest, that's fitting as well. A place where our president was murdered, a good place. Because then I asked the question, because as I saw this story, I started thinking about it. Let's say, because there's an NRA nut running around that every person should have a gun, everyone, and kids, the only way that they get to pass on to the next grade is that if they're proficient in shooting. Knowing how to do math and any of that stuff, that reading, writing, arithmetic, not important. Shooting, we need shooting people. So that's how you move on in grades. What would that moment at Dealey Plaza have been like if every person there was carrying a gun? What would that moment in history have been like if all of these open carry guys were out there fully armed to the teeth when the shots rang out? How many more people do you think would have died? Because I often wonder, in one of those moments, what then happens? Do you get a bunch of yahoos? Because at that point, when everybody's pulling guns out, nobody knows did you do it? Did you do it? In that chaotic moment, you have to wonder. So when I saw this story about, these wingnuts walking around, going to Dealey Plaza, I just kind of went, am I surprised? No. But if I was the guy doing the PR, I think I would, if I was the communications guy, I think I would be going, maybe this isn't such a good place to draw that attention to ourselves here. Just a thought. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We gotta get organized. We gotta do it today. No more madness and fury. No more misery. We gotta get organized.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
It's time for The World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the United Nations. The UN Security Council met yesterday and voted unanimously in favor of granting investigators access to the crash site of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 in eastern Ukraine. The foreign ministers of the Netherlands and Australia were on hand for the special session. Between them, the two countries were home to more than 3/4 of Flight 17's 298 casualties. Speaking after the vote, here is Dutch Foreign Minister Frans Timmermans.
The demise of almost 200 of my compatriots has left a hole in the heart of the Dutch nation. It has caused grief, anger, and despair. To my dying day, I will not understand that it took so much time for the rescue workers to be allowed to do their difficult jobs, and that human remains should be used in the political game.
EU foreign ministers met today to weigh cutting off all military exports to Russia, and you'll hear about it here if and when they make their next move. Heavy fighting consumes the Libyan capital, Tripoli, with the city's international airport serving as the front line between rival militias from the cities of Misrata and Zintan. After days of gunfire and shelling, 90% of the planes at the airport have been destroyed. And for now, the Libyan government lacks the means, and its soldiers the will, to intervene and guard critical infrastructure points. Last week, the Libyan government asked the UN to send military advisors to stabilize the situation, but citing security concerns, the UN instead decided to pull out its staffers from the country. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about a founding father who was a major political player, remembered for only one small thing: Elbridge Gerry established himself as an early rebel against British taxation and other oppressive acts. He was elected to the Massachusetts Assembly and then served in the Second Continental Congress when the Revolutionary War occupied his interest. Later, he was selected as a delegate to the U.S. Constitutional Convention, where he distinguished himself as one of only 3 delegates that refused to sign the Constitution. He had signed the original Articles of Confederation and the Declaration of Independence, but demanded a Bill of Rights stating individual liberties for American citizens, or he would not sign. As we all know now, he eventually got those Bill of Rights in the form of the first 10 amendments. Join us again for the only thing he was remembered for. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today.
Oh, yes. The end of the world. Or at least for crazy people. Isn't that amazing? I mean, you look at these people who, they truly despise this country. And you see them out, they're the ones who will take their guns to Dealey Plaza because they've been led to believe that their way of life or what they believe is the way things used to be is somehow under attack. Or these anti-abortion people who have really no rights, no belief of rights for anyone else but themselves. Got to worry about themselves. And you look at the story, you know, when you go to church, you kind of expect that to be a place where, you know, maybe, you know, possibly you're going to have a little solace, even though you've had some gun nuts go and shoot the place up, and well, I guess maybe not. Maybe church is not the place where you go to get solitude and sanctuary and any of that. Maybe I'm wrong. So this next story isn't surprising when you see that hundreds of these anti-abortionists charged into a church in New Orleans. You know, 'cause the protest, you know, I don't know that you do that in someone's church. Maybe it's just me. But according to the story, this week's protests are being spearheaded by the national anti-abortion group Operation Save America, which I guess used to go by the name of Operation Rescue. And I seem to remember they got themselves into a whole bunch of weird, bizarre stuff. They're basically a militant group. You know, we're going to go out and we're going to kill people to save people. Is kind of their mentality, I guess. And as the story pointed out, and I do remember now Operation Rescue, they may be best known for being tied to the assassination of Dr. George Tiller. You may remember that. But evidently they're back. And they're breaking into churches and causing a stir. And you go, is this really? Do they really have free speech rights in someone else's church? And this is kind of one of those moments where I go back to my grandfather, who said, you know, you've basically got the right to do whatever you want until your rights infringe upon mine. And during the break, as I was thinking about this story, I thought, well, you know what? Maybe this would be a good place for those open carry people to be. So as soon as these crazy people broke into the church, maybe the open carry people could just take them out. I mean, that is the fantasy that they have anyway. So you might as well, go along with it. What the heck? Thoughts? Well, maybe not. Talking about crazy, the head of the group Americans for Legal Immigration PAC, a guy named William Gheen, Gheen, not sure what nationality that is. He was on the, you may know Gheen as the guy who said that he had evidently wanted the people that follow his group to mail dirty underwear to undocumented immigrants. I'm not sure where he'd send them, but he wanted that. He wanted to send dirty underwear to the president and also John Boehner. So this kind of tells you the mentality level. Take your soiled underwear and ship them off. And I'm going, well, maybe if they're that dirty, maybe you need some training. Anyway, he told the Tea Party News Network guy named Larry Altman, that the immigrants who are coming into the country, that they're a type of weapon from which the American people can never recover. Never. This wave of immigration. And I go back and maybe it was me who just learned a little bit when I was in school that we've had waves of immigration. We've had waves of undocumented illegals come in. Only they came on a boat, and we let them off at the island, and we took down their name. Okay, go ahead. There wasn't a whole process. You didn't have to fill out much paperwork until you got here. Just a thought, maybe just a thought. But he's saying, we're never going to recover from this. And Altman had the audacity to ask, how many illegal aliens cross the border? How many of them are Al Qaeda? And I would argue none. Honestly, I was watching a video clip that Fake News on Fox and Friends had up, where this Kelmeed guy was really wanting, you could tell he wanted to go off on illegal immigration. He wanted to go off, and he wanted to say that the people crossing the border who were calling for help, because they had this sheriff from this, I think it was Brooks County, Texas, who, his department is getting calls from people who speak Spanish, who say, we need help. We're stuck. We haven't had water for 3 days. Please, someone help us. And they go out and they help. They do what they can. And they've recovered, numerous bodies, over the years of people who are trying to make it here. And, one way or another, they couldn't make it or didn't make it or whatever. And you could tell this Kilmeade just wanted to go, these people deserve it. And he was fired up, and the sheriff's like, we've got to help these people. They're on our soil. It's a humanitarian crisis. And he's very calm, and this Kilmeade guy just fuming, saying, you could see it in his eyes. This is a guy who, you put him in one of those towels in his head, and he's Al Qaeda. He's no different than the people that he hates, because it's the personality. So you've got these people who say, well, how many Al Qaeda? I'd say none, because it is a difficult cross. It's a difficult border to cross. If you remember, the people who perpetrated 9/11, they came here on planes, and the ones that did cross the border came in from Canada. So this idea, well, Al Qaeda's coming across, no, they're not. These are people who are desperately seeking just the most minimal amount of opportunity to exist. So anyway, Altman asked the question, how many of them are Al Qaeda? And this guy says, well, what the illegals that are coming, and especially the ones that are coming from China. I got to be honest, I didn't know there were Chinese coming across the Mexican border. I'm scared, because they may actually develop it. He says, what the illegals that are coming, and especially the ones that are coming from China, are going to do to America are much more powerful and lasting impacts than anything Al Qaeda could blow up short of nuclear detonation. He goes on to say, how would you put a price tag on a family? Let's say that it's been in the United States for 300 years. And 4 or 5 different members of that family have gone off to World War II and Korea and maybe World War I. to fight for the American way of life. And then finally they get their grandson that's going to be alive in the year 2020 who doesn't get to go to college, go to the college of his choice because the invaders have been brought into the country and put in those seats ahead of him. So basically, I guess you're talking about craziness, insanity. He goes on to say that child's life, that negatively impacts that child's ability to self-actualize, to be all they can be, impacted because the future has been stolen by the usurpations, this treason, this treachery from the highest levels of our own government. You know, that Obama. You know, basically the people who are saying, you know what, let's put landmines on the border. And these are the people who, sadly, have followers. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
For many, the 8-hour day is the standard, but it wasn't always this way. The original American workday was from sunup to sundown, following the demands of an agricultural workday. Over time, the nation became more industrialized and workers moved from individually owned, self-sufficient farms to factories, taking workers from their homes and families. Factory owners demanded the agricultural sunup to sundown workday, forcing workers to toil long hours in grueling conditions. Workers began to collectively organize in pursuit of more time for family, education, and recreation. The cry of 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will grew louder. For a century, the 8-hour day was viewed as the holy grail of the labor movement, and for this hallowed vision, workers sacrificed, often with their blood and their lives. The first strike for shorter hours occurred in May of 1791 in the city of Philadelphia, where carpenters protested a day's wages, paying the same in January as was paid for a longer day in July. Chicago in 1886 was home to one of the largest showings of solidarity. Some 80,000 workers turned out to support the 8-hour cause. It was in Chicago's Haymarket Square that a terrorist bomb and the blazing guns of company-paid police cost policemen and numerous workers their lives and their blood. As a result of the Haymarket tragedy, 8 innocent men were tried and convicted for a crime they did not commit. 4 of the men were hung. The Haymarket Square tragedy was but one of many battles in which working men, women, and children shed blood, tears, and flesh in the pursuit of 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you get the app on the smartphone, the Rick Smith Show. Take it wherever you go. Always there in your pocket. The best part about it, it's absolutely, positively free. So there you go. Something free in this economy. Something to put on your phone, take with you, and always good information, good opportunity to enrage. Let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Ellen Ratner, Talk Radio News Service. Ellen, how are you today?
I am doing just fine.
I'm glad to hear that. I see that the Department of Transportation is issuing some new regulations on tanker cars on trains. Is that true?
They are, and what they're saying is that until the tanker trains can be, or the tankers on the trains can be reformulated so that they're safer, they want to notify each state when this is going to come through their state because they're worried that it's flammable, etc.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been screaming about this for years. You have no idea what's on those trains going through your communities, and shouldn't someone tell you? I mean, because especially when you've got like chlorine gas that goes through a certain area, like in Ohio, they had a spill not too long, a couple years ago. You have no idea what's on these trains.
Right, exactly, and so that's exactly the problem. They don't have any idea, and so now the Department of Transportation has issued new rules. Now, this isn't for every train, but these are for these DOT 111 cars or 101 cars or whatever they're called, and they are particularly on the back end crude oil, which is very highly flammable.
Right. So now I'm sure that the right wing and all of the oil apologists are saying, job killer!
I'm sure they are. But actually, it's probably a job keeper, because if we're all safe, that keeps us safe with jobs.
Yeah, but this is a good way to thin the herd. If you live close to the railroad tracks, maybe you don't reproduce.
Yeah, I don't know.
See, that's the second time I've gotten that in.
You want to thin that herd.
It's the second time I've gotten the thin the herd analogy in. Yesterday we were talking about the woman who worked at McDonald's who had her daughter stay at the park while she was working, and they arrested this woman because the 9-year-old was at the park. And I'm going, when I was 9 years old, I was, nobody ever knew where I was as a kid. And the things that I did, I'm sure my mother would be doing federal time for.
Right. Interesting, huh? Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's we've become helicopter parents in just the most obnoxious of ways. And it's cultural.
Right.
All right, so let's move on.
Well, I just have to say, this should have been done a long time ago.
I agree. So let's move along. Harry Reid was on the Senate floor calling for an end to corporate citizenship scams. Oh.
Yeah. Well, what he's basically saying is that you have places like Walgreens. They're thinking about buying a foreign company and then locating to Switzerland. 8,200 drugstores in the United States started in the United States, and they made $16.7 billion from Medicare and Medicaid, and therefore they can, as a foreign corporation, not have to pay as many taxes.
Which at some point, I've been saying for years, we need to be looking at. I mean, the way that these corporations have figured out how to evade taxes through their tax dodges, the Caymans, the Switzerlands, and all of that, we've got to figure out how to stop that, or maybe just in the view of get rid of corporate taxes at all, and just have much higher income tax rates.
Well, I mean, that's certainly another possibility, but people then corporations might make a lot of money and somehow not, they might turn it into other assets and then not have any income tax go to people.
Yeah, I mean,
that's always a possibility.
They never cease to come up with new ways of screwing the taxpayers.
Right, exactly.
So I see the White House is going to bring private money into the investment fund for infrastructure. Oh boy, please tell me more public-private partnerships.
Well,
please,
I don't
please,
know
please.
much about it because they're really not allowing anybody to know about it until tomorrow. But they are working on essentially an opportunity fund. So they want to get private investment into rural America, and they want to figure out a way of doing that so that this is essentially a workaround a Congress that is doing absolutely nada.
Right. I go back and I think about the Electrification Act, back during the Truman years where they put electricity throughout rural areas and all of the rural development that we didn't have to go begging private companies, oh, please, we'll let you put up toll booths or we'll let you make tons of money off of this. Just seems to me to be very twisted because I got to be honest, Ellen, I don't know how you go and say, okay, Mr. Private Investor, you're going to make money off of a bridge or off of a road without putting up a toll booth and having people pay huge sums of money for it.
Well, that obviously is the question, but I guess they think they figured out something. And again, they haven't released the details and promised not to till tomorrow morning.
Right. But if you look at
I don't know why they don't just release them, but they're not.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go way out on a limb here, which isn't very far, and say that I'm sure there are going to be more toll roads and more toll booths being around because Obama in the last go around wanted to make it easier for states to put toll booths up on different state roads.
Really?
Yeah, that was part of the last round of talks to increase the number of toll roads that were out there. Pennsylvania wanted to toll I-80 and had been wanting to do it for a while.
Wow, I was not aware of that.
And the Fed said no, and now they're going to make it a little bit easier. So there you go. Let's move along. I guess John Kerry's in Israel.
Yes, John Kerry is in Israel. He met with Netanyahu. He met with Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations. He went over to the West Bank and met with Prime Minister Abbas, but so far nothing. And in fact, what we're actually seeing is that there is going to be an increase for another 24 hours of essentially no flying from American aircraft or Canadian aircraft for that matter.
I got to be honest, I don't want to fly anywhere in that whole part of the world.
Oh, well, see, we're working on a talk show host trip. Thought you might want to come.
No, under normal times, maybe possibly. I'll do a lot for my listeners. I'll live in a cardboard box in the middle of December in a parking lot in a supermarket for a week and a half. I'll do just about anything. I'm not getting shot down.
Okay.
So there you go. Is there any hope for this region?
You can have my job when I do.
Okay. Well, there you go. Might need one. Who knows? Any hope for this a peaceful resolution here? I mean, at some point, my entire life.
You know, my cousin Aaron David Miller, you see him a lot on television.
Right.
He wrote the book The Much Too Promised Land, and that's pretty much what he thinks, that he just does not see hope.
Well, I'm not happy to hear that.
Yeah, and he's written a lot about that. He particularly doesn't think that the United States ought to be involved because he thinks that this should be something that the Mideast and Arabs try and help Israel and Palestine solve.
I kind of agree with that. I don't think we should be involved in everyone's backyard.
And actually, apparently Secretary Kerry was made to go through a metal detector when he went into Egypt, and some talk show hosts are flipping out about it. I said, he's not President of the United States.
Yep.
It's really okay.
Yeah, well, I'm not against it. If I got to go through it, why shouldn't he?
Right, exactly.
I guess he puts his pants on the same way I do. He can have them inspected the same way I do. And maybe if that happened, maybe we wouldn't have some of these idiotic laws we've got. Anyway, move along. Obamacare audit. The subcommittee on the House Committee on Oversight and Ways and Means. What's going on there?
It's interesting that today there was a hearing about this, and they talked about how people use fake Social Security numbers, and one member of Congress, a Democrat, said, oh, you mean somebody is faking a Social Security number so they get free health care, so maybe they get a free colonoscopy? Well put.
Yeah, well put. At the end of this, with all of this, I'm hoping that at some point people go, you know what, we should never, all this bickering, we should just be getting health care.
Right.
And, the two decisions yesterday, one saying you can defund it, one saying you can't, at some point I'm hopeful that we get away from one employer-based care and we just do it for ourselves.
Would be nice.
And finally, the border. Did you see the Fox News bit this morning where the Kelmead guy was talking to a sheriff down in Brooks County, Texas, and you could tell that this Kelmead guy just wanted to go all I hate the border and we should shoot him and let them all die. And the sheriff guy's like, we've got a humanitarian crisis. Our department is being called to rescue people who are dying in our backyard. And the sheriff was trying to be reasonable and go, look, we've got to figure this out. And this Kelmead character is going, wow, you could just see in his eyes the hatred and the venom. And I'm going, I'm scared.
Brian's not like that, so I'd have to see it.
I'll send you the clip. He's not like that?
No.
Every clip I've ever seen of this guy is insanity.
Really?
Well, maybe it's just the way people like him scare me. Scared.
Well, okay.
So what's going on? The border bill. What's going on as the Speaker Boehner's talking about the border?
Well, yes. Basically, he's saying that there is the border bill, obviously, that the Democrats is different than the Republicans, that there really is some changes that they would like to see made, and that they feel should be going on, and that he is not very happy with the Democratic bill. He's basically said that Chairman Rogers has a plan that pares down what the president requested to $1.5 billion, but he said they haven't made any decisions. Who knows? The question is, are they going to pass anything before any of this, before they take off? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm not assuming anything positive is going to come out of this, because there's too much. There's too much political hay to be made.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, no, and I think that's right. It's become a terrible political issue, and nobody's doing anything.
Great. Just like a whole host of other issues. Oh, well. Ellen, always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you so much.
Our good friend Ellen Ratner, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
It really looked like, the cauldron of hell.
Record wildfires burn 1 million acres in the Pacific Northwest. It's official. June 2014 was the hottest June on record. EPA moves to block massive Pebble Mine in Alaska. Plus,
hey, where's the meat?
Want to cut your emissions? Then cut out that hamburger.
Do I have to?
Do you care about the planet?
Oh, now you're playing the Care About the Planet card, eh? All of that and much more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Carbon dioxide is actually a benefit to the world, and so were the Jews.
Yeah. Wait, what? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, that guy, carbon dioxide is good, and so are the Jews. We also played a clip from him last week on CNBC saying...
You don't believe in climate change at all. You made a comment...
Just a minute. I believe in climate change.
Sarah,
Shut up.
Shut up. So who the hell is that guy, and what the hell is he talking about?
Yeah, that's William Happer. He's a professor with no discernible experience in climate science. He is paid by a free market think tank that denies climate change and is partly funded by, surprise, ExxonMobil and the Koch brothers.
And his connection, apparently he's compared carbon dioxide to the Holocaust or something?
Yes, he's basically said that carbon dioxide has been demonized the same way that Jews were demonized during the Holocaust in World War II or something like that.
So he was called a denier, and he takes offense because people who deny the Holocaust are called deniers, and oh, it's a whole lot of crazy. I'm glad they give him airtime over on CNBC. Anyway, what kind of real news do you have for us today, Des?
Well, first...
It really looked like, the cauldron of hell. You can see flames everywhere you looked.
A break in the weather is finally helping firefighters who are battling record wildfires across Washington, Oregon, and Western Canada. In Washington state, the Carlton Complex fire is now the largest wildfire in state history, burning an area 4 times larger than Seattle, destroying at least 200 homes.
With this kind of heat and wind, it looks like Eastern Washington's going to burn to the ground.
As of July, in Washington state, the total burn area from numerous fires is already more than the yearly average over the last decade, and fire season's only about a week old. Meanwhile, it's official. June 2014 was the hottest June ever recorded on the planet since record-keeping began in 1880.
Impossible. I have been told by global warming deniers that the planet has been cooling over the past 17 years.
Yeah, well, not according to the annual State of the Climate report from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This hottest June on record follows the hottest May on record for the planet. That's 2 months in a row that the planet has broken all-time heat records.
For the record, I deny that.
Well, the report also confirms that the world's oceans are absorbing much of the heat trapped by greenhouse gas emissions, and that's raising ocean temperatures not just to a record high for the month of June. NOAA says that these were the hottest ocean temperatures ever recorded. Ever. This past spring, levels of heat-trapping carbon dioxide in the atmosphere passed 400 parts per million for the first time in human history and have now stayed above that level. In California, 2013 was the hottest and driest year for the state on record, and in the midst of that record drought, state regulators have ordered an emergency shutdown of 11 oil and gas wastewater injection wells because they could be polluting groundwater. In the past, the state allowed the oil industry to intentionally pollute some groundwater aquifers to dispose of toxic drilling waste because they didn't think those aquifers would ever be tapped. Now the state is in record unending drought. ProPublica says the state was so lax in oversight that the oil companies very likely have also polluted protected aquifers. Want to reduce your carbon footprint?
No.
Well, for those who do, you can do it by cutting out beef. According to a new study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, beef production has the biggest environmental impact of all livestock production. Researchers studying the entire process from farm to supermarket found that eggs, pork, and poultry were all about equivalent in environmental impact, but beef generates 10 times the environmental impact and has the highest carbon emissions. Finally, score one for salmon. In Alaska, the EPA has proposed new restrictions for water pollution that would effectively block the development of the controversial proposed Pebble mine.
The EPA has denied them their license to mine?
Well, sort of, but not outright. They put a cap on how many miles of streams and wetlands can be destroyed in the headwaters of Bristol Bay, the world's largest salmon fishery.
Yeah, sounds like the EPA is a denier to me. For much more on those stories and all the other ones we denied you, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes, and you can find and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Shut up.
When it feels this free, I long to stop.
Your proud defender of the working class majority, Rick Smith.
Do the Wall Street shuffle, hear the money rustle, watch the greenbacks tumble, feel the starlight crumble.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So the anti-Obama crowd still continuing. Yesterday we talked about the guy who said hang, draw, and quarter wasn't good enough. Not good enough for this guy. And, I look at this and I go, if I were him, and look, I've beat up on him enough. There are things that I think he should be doing more of. There are things that I would like to see him do. There are priorities I would like to see him pursue. And the same thing with Bush. I mean, I never questioned his loyalty to his country or his love of his country, or I questioned his decisions. I questioned if he was sane. I questioned if, Dick Cheney may have had his hand too far up. Questioned that stuff. But never this, he wasn't born with American values. According to reports, according to The Hill, Steve King, the Iowa Republican, told the crowd there that, Obama, he wasn't born with the American experience. He said he would not assert where he was born. According to the video, he said, I can tell you his vision of America is not like our vision of America, the one that we know. I love the fact that you make him the outsider. He said, no, I don't assert where he was born, but I will just tell you that we are all certain he was not raised with an American experience. So these things that beat in our hearts when we hear the national anthem and when we say the Pledge of Allegiance doesn't beat the same for him. Really? I love that positioning. It's what the right does masterfully. The others. You create this others, you dehumanize. This way, any attack, anything is okay. It's all justified because he's not one of us. It's masterful, but it's also very dangerous because then you whip up crazy. And I worry what happens when crazy gets whipped up. When you've got people who are walking through Dealey Plaza without thinking of the historical ramification of we're going to walk with our open carry guns, you kind of got to wonder. Some good news, though. I'm excited. I am thrilled. Absolutely excited. Michelle Bachmann thinking about running for president in 2016. According to USA Today, she says she's considering it. She told Real Clear Politics, I guess Tuesday, that she has learned a great deal from her failed bid in 2012. And according to reports, she'll certainly draw upon those lessons if she were to run again. She said, like anything else, practice makes perfect. And I think if a person has gone through the process, for instance, I had gone through 15 presidential debates, it's easy to see a person's improvement going through that. And yeah, I mean, she got better with each debate. The hilarity, the comic genius. Oh, I am so looking forward to Snow White entering back into the race. Please, please, please. And what I'm hoping for even more, because there was some talk of Marsha Blackburn, the Republican congresswoman from Tennessee, taking Bachmann's place. It would be great to see the two of them going at each other. Crazy and crazier. I mean, to see who could. And then you throw into the mix, you know Rick Perry's going to be there. You know, Ron Paul or Rand Paul's going to throw his hat in. They're going to be there. Romney certainly is coming back. Chris Christie may throw in. It'll be a huge field, and watching that paring down should be quite interesting. Now, I remember saying when she resigned, when she said she was retiring or whatever, that she wasn't going to run for re-election, that this was going to give her time to spend on the presidential campaign, which I do believe that's what we're seeing. We're seeing them, maybe her raising a little bit of money, doing the talk circuit. Maybe she'll get $20,000-$30,000 a speech. If I were getting $20,000 a speech, I'd be talking to everybody. So it'll be interesting. She says that she thinks it's important to have sufficient time to lay the necessary groundwork, to have a really solid campaign and a campaign put together. She also says that probably I would think about the decision earlier than she did last time. So, it'll see what's happening. She did, if I remember, won the Iowa straw poll, won the Ames straw poll, and then the Iowa straw poll later. Turns out, as reports had it, she actually bought them. But hey, either way, you won, and that's all that really matters. So I'm curious, and now I'm excited. I was kind of down today. Today was kind of a downer day, but now I'm actually pretty pumped up for tomorrow. There may be Michelle Bachmann 2016, and wouldn't it be great if it was a Bachmann Santorum ticket? Because I don't think Santorum could carry the ticket, or a Santorum Bachmann. That would be phenomenal. Now, again, you go back and you think about some of the fun stuff from the 2012 campaign, like when she was in New Hampshire and said that she was standing in the place where the shot heard around the world happened, and you could hear it, or the start of the Revolutionary War. You could do it right here, and that was Massachusetts. Or when she was in Waterloo, Iowa, where she said that John Wayne was born when it was actually John Wayne Gacy. That was fun. So I can't wait. I think it's going to be interesting. I would welcome her with open arms and a good chuckle into the primary season. I think it's a good thing. It can only be good for the Democrats. Not so good for Not so good for the Republicans, which, again, they seem to be killing each other. Lastly, it looks like there may be a Republican lawsuit here in Pennsylvania, which we're going to talk a little bit about tomorrow. We're supposed to have our friend Attorney Erwin Aronson on the program. And again, our phone system's kind of buggy today. But it looks like that the Republicans are looking at suing Governor Corbett. And as I tweeted out today, Pennsylvania GOP, you're supposed to sue the opponent. Boehner sued Obama. If you're going to sue it should be the other party. You shouldn't be suing yourself. But I have been enjoying that civil war as well. Anyway, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you taking time to listen to the program, to participate. I got a number of emails from folks today. I appreciate that. Always great talking with you. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thanks for being here.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.
We see the storm out on the horizon. The clouds grow dark in the midnight sky. We feel the fire burning in the belly. The flame leaps out with an angry cry. From the underground where the night is endless. From the mine and rig where our work is done. From every plant and every nation we cry. We are many, we are one. Power, there is power in the union. Power, there is power in our hands. Power, we stand and fight together. There's power in a union of many lands. Power, come and reach across the borders. Power, come and open up your eyes. Power, when we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize. Fight the power of one with the power of many. You fight the power of evil with the power of right. You fight hatred with love. Fight darkness with light. Power, there is power in a union. Power, there is power in our hands. Power, we stand and fight together. There is power in a union of many lands.